Of November 16th, 2020. And the
Remember
first,
to record, Kevin.
Thanks, Sue.
That was my job, Helen.
what was your job?
Conference will now be recorded.
Tell Kevin to record.
Is
I
that
thought
what-
Stu was the recorder.
Okay, so I think, I don't have the agenda before me, but I think we usually review the agenda. I gotta close the door, the dog.
Yes.
So are there any changes or additions or deletions to the agenda that anyone has? Okay, seeing none. The next thing I guess is, are there any comments or questions from the public dealing with items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Okay, now I have the agenda. Let's see. And then we'll next have announcements. David, do you have any announcements?
No, we've got to behave because one of my students is sitting in on the meeting tonight. She's got an assignment for another class. And so, Rachel, are you there?
Yeah, DeRocher.
Yeah. Turn on your camera so everybody can meet you.
Oh,
Rachel.
Sam Roach, you got a couple?
Yeah,
Sam,
Oh, Sam's there too. Hey, Sam.
Here.
My computer doesn't have access, but I can see.
What's the
Oh,
matter with your video, Rachel?
it didn't allow access. I would have to quit out for it.
Oh,
Okay.
don't do that.
all right.
So
Well,
Dave, we have
thank
to make
you
sure this
for-
meeting goes to midnight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
There you
Rachel,
go.
that's how long it
Their
goes. I can
evenings
make
don't
you.
start till 11, so this is nothing. And so Jessica Sankey, are you another of David's
She's not
students?
one of mine, but she could be a student.
I'm
Okay.
not a student. No, I'm a resident in Queen City Park.
Well,
Oh,
there.
okay.
we just
Did
gave
you
a
have a
compliment. We thought you were still a student.
So did you have a comment to make on an item that's not on the agenda?
I was calling in because there were a few incidents just behind my house in Red Rocks Park
Right.
recently, and a few neighbors had asked that I sit in and and just share what happened and our concerns with sort of what's happening in Red Rocks Park after dark.
Okay, so why don't you share those? I got an email that was very disturbing, and I think I suggested that you share with the council, and potentially it could be a agenda item at a future meeting.
Sure. So I think the most recent incident was actually it was actually addressed. So there was a group of quasi-organized runners that they gather at undisclosed locations and run as a group. And I think they tout themselves as drinkers as well. So they're playing scavenger hunts. These are young adults, I'm guessing, but scavenger hunts after dark, running and drinking. And so no one was aware that this was happening, and it was happening after dark. And when I looked out my back, I'm putting my kids to bed, I'm reading them books. I look out in the backyard and into Red Rocks Park. There's a path that butts our property, goes down to the beach, and there were close to 20 flashlights, and they were pointing up into our backyards. And our dogs, there were 3 dogs that were concerned, and you could just see that there were a lot of people in the woods. And there had been an incident earlier this fall that involved police. So immediately, I'm thinking, oh gosh, this is like a search squad of police. There's so many flashlights out there, and they were yelling to each other, sort of like a call and response thing that was probably part of this scavenger hunt that they do. There were whistles that they were blowing, and one of my neighbors called out and said, you can't do this in the park after dark. And men and women were calling back saying, oh, this is public property, we're running, just getting very defensive and seemingly entitled to be out doing what they were doing. It ended up being harmless, but they were crashing through a neighbor's backyard and jumping over a chain link fence that runs alongside the road. Just alarming. I don't know. I feel like there was another incident earlier in the fall where the police were involved, and there were people also on that path that goes down to the beach after dark. And I believe I overheard the conversation, same thing. I'm putting my kids to bed and I look out and there's flashlights. And I believe it was 2 young males. There was alcohol involved, and one was wielding a machete and had blood all over him. Just from what the police were saying back and forth to each other. And they escorted him out of the park. And thankfully someone had seen this going on and reported it. I believe it was probably a walker or a runner in the park. But those are just 2 incidents within the fall that kind of raised some flags around our neighborhood. And we were wondering about increased signage or lights at the entrance to the park, making people more aware that after sunset, people aren't supposed to be using the park. The group of runners was identified and addressed. I believe it was Holly who wrote to them and let them know that it was not okay to be running around in large groups at night, shining flashlights into private property.
And they haven't shown up again.
They didn't know. I think it was probably a one-time incident that happened. But my neighbor was also concerned about the number of beach fires that are happening right now. Down at the end, sort of by where the intake is for the water department. There have been almost every night, people have been lighting fires, campfires down on the beach. And with the drought, it is in the southerly winds, it does get a little bit scary to see that happening. I would hate to see a forest fire start. It could happen pretty easily at this point.
And are those at night as well, when the park should be closed?
At sunset, yeah. At night.
We've had some beautiful sunsets for sure.
That's for sure. I know. I can't really, you can't blame them, but I do know that the fire danger is pretty scary.
No, I'm not giving them an excuse. I'm just thinking about, I can understand people wanting to go down there.
be down there for sure. I know.
Yeah.
Then, and I guess it's just in general that clearly the park there's been an increased usage of the park, and thankfully it's open for everyone to enjoy during this time. And I imagine with increased usage, you're going to have increased problems and concerns. So we were glad to sort of come around and figure out who that group was. They were leaving piles of flour too, I guess, to mark their scavenger hunt, and somebody's dog got really sick from eating this undisclosed white powder. And it was another separate Google group that went around, and the fire department came, and I just thought, oh gosh, all the resources that went into figuring out what happened that night. It's a little bit crazy to think that we had to call the fire department and all that to sort of figure out what had happened. But I just wanted to share those things and see if there was.
Well, it sounds as if you and your neighbors know who to contact in terms of getting some response. And I think it sounds like Holly responded and the police at some point. So that's good. And so I wanted the rest of the council to hear the stories as well. And we can, speak with Holly and Justin and Shawn perhaps about, checking on the park, perhaps at a more regular basis, given these incidents. And just the fact that more and more people know about these parks because they've been outside during COVID. So I think they're using them more. Kevin, did you?
Holly's on the line or on the meeting, and she's been, we've had these discussions with Holly, and Holly might want to update a little bit if she could. Holly.
Okay, great. Hi.
So, yeah, this is a little out of ordinary, Helen, but I know it's an important issue for a lot of people. So if Holly to weigh in here, that would be good.
Sure. So hi, Jessica. Actually, nice to go face to face. I know we've been emailing her in the same group. So Jessica basically went over, I hadn't been aware of the first machete incident. I don't know if that was isolated from this group or not. And the first thing I actually learned about this group in the park was, I believe, Wednesday. I had talked with one of the firefighters who had been on the call to follow up on the unknown white substance, which subsequently is flour. And then it was actually a resident from Queen City Park that had sent me a website for the group that they thought was probably down there. And so I did email that group. I also have looped in both the fire and police chief in terms of, we're definitely seeing an increase of activity in the park that's, not ideal. So certainly anything after dark, the park closes at dawn. It's open from dawn to dusk, so it closes at dusk. And campfires are never permitted unless you have a special permit that has to be signed off by the fire chief or somebody in his stead, and coordinated through our department. So I think there are a number of ordinances that are being broken right now. So fires are, beach bonfires are one. Being in the park and active after dark is another. I think also people have shared concerns of the continued off-leash dog issue, which is, even more problematic now that we're, in the next surge of the pandemic, as well as masks. So there are some things that we can't control. So masking is not enforceable at this point through the police department, but our ordinances are. So I think we continue to try to be creative in how we address that. The animal control officer allotments are pretty minimal, so they don't have a ton of time contracted for the city, and then, specialized for Red Rocks. And it's a tricky place to patrol. Everything is hidden in there, and it requires more than just a drive-through, which most of our parks would require from officers on patrol. So Chief Burke has definitely said he's willing to put heads together with Kevin, Justin, and I, and try to come up with some, some action plans and some solutions potentially. I know Jessica and some had mentioned, maybe a new sign with a light. I would leave that up to the council. The park does have new signage in, but certainly nothing that's illuminated, and we don't have funding kind of set aside for that. So if that was, an option that we wanted to explore, we'd need to kind of tease out what that would cost and where that would be located and kind of how long that process would take. So, in conversations with folks, but happy to have some clear direction as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's great. In forming those signs too, just, I don't know if it's worthwhile to make people aware that there's a neighborhood right here. And when they're walking on that path, they're literally pretty much in our backyards. So I don't know if that would dissuade people or what, but just to make people aware that their actions don't go unheard.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Holly. That sounds like, a good plan to go forward. And I walk there often. So, and I'm quiet. I don't disturb the neighbors. But I can appreciate how difficult it is to patrol that because it's beautiful paths in the woods and you can't really see what's going on. You can't see the beach unless you're on the beach. But those are issues that we need to attend to. So thank you for bringing it up, and I'm sure Holly will continue to be in contact, Jessica, when they come up with a plan, and maybe part of the planning process can include some discussions with that neighborhood about how you can help and what would be some positive things or useful things to do to keep the city apprised of ordinance breakers and rule breakers and whatever. So, Tim, did you want to make a comment? Tim Barrett?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a quick one. Thanks for bringing this up, Jessica, but there has also been some chatter in Front Porch Forum about vandalism in Farrell Park. So while Holly is here, I wanted to make her aware that if she hadn't seen that herself, damage to some signage and people dragging rocks out onto the bike path. And it's happened a couple of times. I'm wondering if the police have any tricks up their sleeves to identify the culprits.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I was made aware earlier this past week that there had been a weekend of kind of overturning benches and garbage cans and some of that kind of some rocks in the pathway. And specifically, I think we're talking about the pathway kind of from the Szymanski Park over to Farrell and then up the hill. That would be parallel to Swift Street. And so kind of thought, okay, maybe an isolated incident, maybe, post-Halloween related. It happened again this past weekend. So I've been in contact with our parks foreman and I said, it's probably time for a police report. So I did email today Chief Burke just to let him know. So I'm not sure if they have any leads. I didn't hear of any kind of permanent vandalism. It was more overturning of some items and things kind of strewn across the rec path, but we are following up on that. I did know about it, but thanks for that reminder, Tim, and we'll continue to work with the police department to see what we can do to curb those things. We have removed some of the garbage cans from our pathways and parks because the winter season is coming and they're just not utilized that much. So not sure what kind of activity is happening there, but we'll continue to follow it.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, any other comments from the public? Not on the agenda. All right, we'll move on to announcements. And David, you were just sharing that some of your students are on board but have no other announcement. Tim Barrett, has the pension? No, I mean, that's
We're going to
later.
hear from Pat next.
Oh, that's right. Okay. All right. Megan, do you have anything to report?
No, I don't. Thank you, Helen.
Okay, and I don't either. Okay,
Very sorry to hear about the machete incident. I was
yes.
curious to know if that was an attack on someone who was in the park. That just wasn't clear to me. I don't
I'm
know.
sorry. Sorry, let me just do this again. I was just literally overhearing what was happening in my backyard, and I didn't follow up with the police to inquire. And I think it was some strange thing where it was within a group of people, and they were just young men, and it seemed like, again, it wasn't an attack on the public, but someone had seen what was happening, that someone had blood on them and potentially had a weapon, and they were also doing some call and response. It was very odd. When I looked out, there were 2 police dealing with it, but it wasn't an attack. It
So
was just
the
a very.
police probably have some information. Holly, do you have any more?
No, I don't. The only thing I was going to say, Helen, is that I didn't get a call from the police that any crime had happened in the park, and that's traditionally, the appropriate follow-up. So I'm guessing it was kind of a live action role play or running a scavenger hunt that maybe was set up to look like something that it wasn't. I'm not sure. The first I had heard about it was, this past week when we heard about all the flower and those nighttime activities. And I never heard about it from the police. So I assumed that wasn't a credible anything, but I can certainly follow up.
I'm glad to have Holly's feedback. Thank you, Holly. I think that's important. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Kevin, the city manager's report. I don't have anything to report either.
We've got my wife's cat screaming in the background here, so sorry if you hear some weird noise in the background when I'm speaking.
Your voice is really funny, though, to my ears.
Let me turn-
Whoops.
Is that any better?
No,
Is that-
no, it sounds like you're in a, I don't know, in a tin can.
Can you still make out what I'm saying?
Well,
Pretty much.
keep going. We'll figure it out.
Okay. I want to let the council and the public know that we took precautionary measures related to the pandemic based upon the governor's executive order. And so we have shut down City Hall to the public and to Donna's office, the clerk's office, where you can still go in to examine records, but you have to have an appointment to do so. Again, going back to the words that we used back in the spring, abundance of caution. We want to make sure the public and the staff are safe. So also the library is now closed again to the public, but is still open curbside service. And they will be in this posture until such time as the governor lets us know that it's allowable to go back and open up. Meantime, our staff who can work from home, and that's quite a bit of our staff who are not essential employees, are working from home. So we have a skeletal staff in the city hall right now. Tom and I one of us will be there every day. The rest of our folks will be working from home. Excuse me. This does not affect the police department or the fire department or water quality. Those are all essential employees, and they will continue in their regular work schedule as they had throughout the earlier pandemic. And check with our colleagues in the other cities. Everybody pretty much is doing this, taking the same steps. Little variation in there, but pretty much the same thing. So we're shut down again. Our folks working from home who can, and we're hoping that this is not long duration. Any questions from the council or public about the new measures. One thing I would say is, we've been through this before, so it was pretty easy to make the decision on Thursday and have it be effective for some people on Friday and for everybody else on Monday.
Any questions, council or the public? I appreciate your abundance of caution. It's very disappointing for sure, but
Yeah.
I think that's what we need to do.
Well, and for now, we have no layoffs, no furloughs, and we're not anticipating that. But we'll just see how we move forward. So, thank you. That's what I've got.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 5, the consent agenda. We have 4 items: approving disbursements, approving minutes of 5 meetings, and consider and possibly approve a transportation alternative grant to support phase 1 of the Spear Street bike and ped improvements. And the last one was authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a 20-year lease for dark fiber with First Light based on results of a competitive bid. So I would entertain a motion for approval
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
I'll second.
And Emma, okay, and
Good luck,
Megan
Megan.
seconds. Are there any questions or discussion? Tim, I bet yours will be on item D.
Well, it was going to be, but it's, you know, I have something before that.
Okay.
Was I asleep at some previous city council meeting and missed the agenda item where somebody talked about building a bike path along Spear Street on the direction that they're proposing here? I don't ever remember seeing that on any proposal. Like, it came out of nowhere. So I'm just curious. I thought, you know, we had talked heavily about, you know, Dorset Street from Sadie Lane all the way to Old Cross Road, and I just was wondering where this came from. Correct me if I'm wrong. I have no recollection of looking at this 3.5 mile section.
Okay, well, we have Ashley Parker is with us, and we also have Bob Britt, who's on the Bike and Ped Committee, correct? So, Ashley, do you want to comment, or do you want Bob? I think it probably must have been on their lists of a whole bunch of different places, but
How did I miss it?
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm
Well,
happy
maybe
to-
because you don't live there. I don't know. Ashley, do you want to comment?
Yes, I can give you guys a little feedback. So this project has been on the Bike Ped Committee's priority list for funding and for completion. We actually also just recently completed a scoping study, which went in front of the Bike Ped Committee for their review and included this project. This project is actually part of a larger scoping study also that looks at the entire length of Spear Street, that goes from where the end of that path is at the forestry building all the way to the town line, Shelburne town line. So this first phase is going to focus on a shared use path that will run from where it ends at the forestry building to the intersection of Swift and Spear, and with hope for in the future to complete something, maybe not a shared use path, but potentially a sidewalk with on-road bike lanes the rest of the way to Shelburne. So this has been something that's been on their project list, their priority list. The scoping study is actually, the Bike Ped Committee just provided some recommendations that staff were hoping to bring to the council. And so this grant is a piece of the puzzle to try to get some funding to make sure that it can get completed in the near term.
Okay, Justin Rabideau?
Hello. In addition to all the places Ashley mentioned, this project is in the approved FY21 capital improvement plan. So it's not out of nowhere or left field or just a like head creation. It's been in the CIP for a couple of years and is included in the current fiscal year CIP as well. Thank you.
Okay.
And is it intended to have it built on the western side of the road?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you'd have to take down some of those old growth trees that are, just on the uphill going south from, the Potash Brook area?
Potentially, that hasn't been designed at all, so we don't really know how it's gonna look going through that section.
I mean, I'm not against this, but I looked at the path, and I don't want to make this a big discussion. I mean, I'll probably vote yes, but to me, it doesn't seem like a high value add section. I mean, if you made the road wider and gave it a true bike lane, I could see it, but I don't know. I'm kind of doubtful about how much use that section would actually get compared to other sections of bike path that already exist that provide, around the block type perimeters. Because if you're at the Forestry Research Station, you can go all the way around, through Eastwoods and up to UVM and come back down. And if you're at the White Barn, you have a nice big perimeter to go all the way through back to Overlook Park, through Farrell Park, and down to Szymanski Park. So I just question it a little bit. I just wanted to say that for the record. Just curious.
Well, I walked
Maybe
that
Bob has an
section.
opinion on it. I mean,
Okay. Well, I walk that section often, and I think that is I think you'd be surprised at how many people are on the bike path. And yes, then it heads east to hook around the country club and stuff. But I think there'd be considerable interest in going up the hill and connecting with the other bike paths. It really opens up quite a bit more.
mhm.
But I appreciate not cutting down old growth trees. It's about the last thing we need to do. But
one of the big considerations, Tim, is that when we did the survey of each quadrant of the city, the neighbors in that quadrant really wanted that connection up to city center, to the high school and to the university. They can go right up from Farrell Street and connect in basically 5 different directions that they, or 4 different directions that they can't do now. And we've had many reports of very serious accidents. 2 doctors, well, at least 1 doctor, I'm not sure if the other person is a doctor or a technician, where people have been hit by cars in that section. In the short term, I believe Justin's going to work on bike lanes and maybe widening the road a little bit. But in the, this type of project takes 4 years to complete. So again, it's heavily a commuter path. I went to take pictures out of the blue one day of the area, and at least 4 bicyclists were coming through, and this was around noontime, and they looked like they were heading back towards the hospital. So I do think it's a big
That's my point, though, Bob.
commuting route.
If it's a heavy commuter area, it really needs a bike lane. My only question is, does it really need, a pedestrian rec path crash through the side all the way through up to those woods, and potentially cutting down a lot of those trees in that really nice old growth area? But I'm not going to say any more, and I'll go ahead and vote for this. Thank you.
well, you've got quite a few years to weigh in, because it's, if you looked at the time frame, it's not going to be done if we
trees
get
look
the
a little
funding
bigger.
till 2025. I'm hoping I
Yeah.
still can walk then.
Bob has already expressed what I was going to say, Tim. There's in usual times, I'm back and forth that way several times a day, most days, and it's got a whole lot more bicycle traffic than you might imagine. And so your point is well taken about the bikes, but from my perspective, if we're going to go to the trouble of putting in a bike lane, it's much safer to finish the job and put in a complete rec path, quite honestly. And hopefully they can go around.
I'll tell
the
you,
tree.
if you're a serious bike commuter, you're not going to get on a bike path on the side. You're going to take that hill full speed, 40 miles an hour downhill
Well,
on the right of the road.
maybe. You're probably right.
Well, I'm a pedestrian and I like being able to walk safely and not on the edge of Spear Street.
Oh, it's not a
tell
good
you
place
that
to
much.
walk.
No, it's not. And when you want to walk different places, you've got these sections where that you're stuck with walking on someone's front lawn or, in the breakdown lane. Are there any other questions about the items on the consent agenda? You don't have any, Tim, on the dark light or dark fiber?
Yeah, I was thinking.
No, it's
you were
cool.
It's cool.
Dark fiber's
Okay.
cool. Yeah, it's cool.
Megan?
It's so dark, it's cool.
Okay. Megan, do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say that I do recall this section being of concern with regard to safety, talking about the bike path. And I, when I was reading about the cost, I too thought of what Kevin Dorn said about simply, doing something a lot less expensive. But I think, it does serve a purpose. I think that it can be a danger, especially that intersection around Swift Street and Spear. I think that that's been carefully thought out. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Okay, if there's no other comments or questions, I'll call the roll to approve the consent agenda. Dave Kaufman,
Yes.
Tim Barrett, Thomas Chittenden,
Aye.
Megan Emery,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. And so that was unanimous. Tim did a thumbs up. Okay, moving on to item 6. Discuss and possibly approve the Common Roots Lease Agreements for the Wheeler and Underwood property. We have Carol McQuillen. Has she joined us yet? I don't see her name, but she'll probably be coming. But Andrew, are you going to talk about this lease agreement? I had some comments or questions.
Sure. I know Holly and Katie are also on. I don't know if they have any kind of
Whomever
input.
wants to talk about it. I mean, maybe it should be Holly since the agreement is with the Parks and Rec Department. So
Hi,
Holly?
everybody. Yeah, I know Katie's on as well. I guess what I would share is that the Recreation and Parks Committee has been great. We entertained this months ago. We had public session on it. We had lots of comments from the public that we tried to infuse into the lease, as well as some comments from the Dog Park Committee that we tried to include in the lease as well. And then we had a small working group after that meeting that kind of fine-tuned some of the essential pieces that we wanted to get in there. That included Katie, myself, and Carol. And so what's in front of you now is the result of, a couple different public meetings and then some fine-tuning in our small work group. So from the Recreation and Parks Committee standpoint and from my standpoint, I believe it's inclusive of all the public comments that we heard. And I think people are feeling good about that process.
Okay.
And I would,
Go ahead. Yes.
sorry. Yeah,
Andy.
sorry. So I would just say, Holly handed it off to me a couple of weeks ago and sort of did a standard legal review of the documents, basically did a side by side of the original the original Wheeler lease, some of the initial drafts that were put before council several months ago, some of the previous comments we got from a couple of residents, as well as the committee's sort of draft that was given to me. I corrected some, formatting issues, internal inconsistencies, and other things that just kind of find in a standard legal review. And other than that, it was pretty straightforward. Made sure the insurance requirements were updated, indemnification language consistent with our other contracts.
Okay, I just had a question so it's clear in my mind, because I was wondering about the 60-40 split, but even long before, it'll be a while before the city realizes any income from this, because as I understand it, the first 5 or 6 years, Common Roots will receive all of the income in order to pay off, I suspect it's a loan for building the, pizza oven and the shelter. Is that right?
Correct.
Is that-
There's a as a appendix to one of the or exhibit to one of the agreements. There's a sort of a cost overlay of the initial costs associated with developing the property, and I think that the total numbers are sort of on there. And it is my understanding that all of the initial 100% of the initial revenue will go to pay down that, and once that's paid down, there is that 60-40 split.
Okay, and the 60-40 was arrived, I mean, why isn't it like 50-50? I mean, it's our land, the city's land. We do a fair amount to support the property. Could they not generate enough income to keep themselves going if it was 60-40? I mean, 50-50? I'm just curious.
I can't speak to that. I don't know, Holly, if that came up, or I don't know if it was Tom who had some initial discussions as well, but I can't speak to that.
Tom may know more than I know about how that kind of split was originally put into kind of a draft form that came from, a Common Roots request. And I think from the Recreation and Parks Committee perspective, I think as long as we had some language in around some assurances of kind of a yearly income base, there didn't seem to be a concern about the 60-40 split, really being that Common Roots would be the outlayer of all, services that do marketing and to make sure that they vetted all of the appropriate folks and were touring people and doing that component. And so certainly as a Recreation and Parks Department, we don't have the capacity to be doing that for an event site. So I believe that she came to that knowing that they would have the capacity and that really it's more of a site fee for owning the land. That was the 40 split.
Okay. All right, so Tom Hubbard, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to add that was the proposal from Common Roots, Helen. I think it was because they were going to need to staff the events so that they had a little bit more in terms of the cost affiliated with paying people to actually be there, whether they were hosting it for themselves or for another group. So that was the proposal that was put forward by Common Roots. I know that Carol was going to join us tonight. I don't see her online. She's out of state. She's away. And I'm wondering if she's just having problems connecting. But her intent was certainly to be here. And I know she could have better answered that question.
Well, no one else has a concern. Tim?
I just want to get the reassurance from Andrew that the contract meets all of the city's requirements and satisfies our liability needs so that, we're not put at some disadvantage. And it's 25 years for both the garden plot and for the homestead extension, right? Total.
Yeah. To answer the first part of that, I did update some of the indemnification language to be sure, specifically for the use of the to the outdoor kitchen, that we are held harmless from use, as well as to ensure that the insurance requirements that we require pursuant to the original lease agreement with for Wheeler, that's extended to this outdoor kitchen as well, to the limits that we typically require.
Do they have to show you proof of premium of insurance that they've purchased?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And yeah, sort of standard language there. 30-day notice of discontinuance, all that type of assurance. Also, something that I think is important to note in both of these leases is we now have, I would say, pretty favorable sort of no cause termination clauses upon, I think it's 120 days notice, which is actually gives the city a very significant out if there are any issues.
Okay. And the 60-40 split is of the net profit, correct? Does it say net? I can't remember.
Correct.
I
I
mean,
believe
'cause
it's
that-
revenue is the word used.
So revenue is net revenue, not gross?
No, good
Because the
question.
cost of the people would have already been, I mean, I don't mean to nitpick, I'm just trying to make sure that, you know, our stewardship is good and we're not just giving away the farm or whatever.
Oh, it is net revenue, net rental revenue in the agreement.
Net. Yeah, it says net.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there is also, to speak to one of Holly's earlier points, there is a minimum revenue amount that they're obligated to provide us annually of 10,000.
Okay.
Right, that
But
was
that's
a question.
after they've paid off everything, correct?
Correct.
And required to have 10 third-party events annually. What if they don't? What if they don't attract? It's on the top of page 5. So it's the
Yeah.
same section that Helen's been discussing, number 10 there, under third-party rentals.
My reading of that would be the city is still entitled to 10,000 no matter what, even if they have 10 events or if they're not able to get 10 events. That's the bottom line number that we're looking for from this.
That has been vetted. I have the same question that Tim asked earlier with regard to the cost of plowing, the cost of upkeep that the city's going to be providing. In other words, we will be whole, I guess, or with regard to, you know, all the costs that will be generating in order to keep the property up. That $10,000 is sufficient in over
Yeah,
25 years.
Yeah, do we break even with the plowing and, I don't know, there's other stuff they do too.
So I'll take a stab at that one, Helen. I think this is one of the reasons why administratively we were supporting this venture. Right now, the city's putting 100% into that. The only payment that's made by either the Friends of the Library Group or Common Roots is for the actual utility costs for the house itself. So this was a way to begin recouping some of the costs that the city is putting not only into the house, but into the land up there. And the idea was this would give the city an additional revenue source to be able to do that either at Wheeler or at one of the other parks. And I think that's one of the recommendations that the Recreation and Parks Committee had, is that, well, let's not tie ourselves just to Wheeler. There may be needs in other parks as well that money might need to go to. So we expanded the opportunity for the revenue to be used elsewhere. So this is the first time that we will be recouping some of the costs for the use of the land by having them operate and hold events for the kitchen.
If there's any upkeep to the house, I'm assuming that's the city's responsibility as well. It's not just the plowing and the lawn care. I mean, that's the question I had too.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, I think Holly would agree. Common Roots has put a significant investment into the house. I think the city's pleased with what Common Roots has done with the building itself. The city, again, is putting some cost into the roof, but in terms of the inside upkeep of the building and the improvements that have been made to the inside of the building, they've been significant by Common Roots into the tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes, yeah. But how much did, go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, we're gonna have some very significant costs at Wheeler in the next 5 to 10 years. At some point, the boiler is gonna need to be replaced. The roof is gonna need to be replaced, and some other costs. And this will provide a revenue stream, so we don't have to hit the taxpayer on it.
sufficient enough. It's been vetted that it's sufficient enough, because as Helen points out, and I didn't understand that from my read, this begins after the outdoor oven has been paid off.
Yeah, and that's $70,000. So that's going to be, I don't know, maybe 5 years, 4 years. It depends. Depends what we can do next summer, I guess, in part.
That's a lot of pizza.
Well, it's not just the pizza, which I've been told is excellent, but
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we have enough going forward. I mean, for 25 years, this is going to be the contract in place. And I just want to make sure that this is enough to cover the unforeseen. If we're going to be having, the public using these grounds, we have to maintain, a level of upkeep to make sure that public, not only the roof, but also the bricks and all these things that old buildings need to have renovated regularly, that we're not going to be setting ourselves up for any liability that the $10,000 per year, and who knows when that will begin to flow into our coffers. I just want to make sure that we have enough to cover.
I think
Well,
that's the hope, Megan. And, again, I think if we had the staff and resources through Parks and Recreation, Holly would have loved to have been able to do this herself. But because we're needing to rely on an outside organization to do this, even though the city will have an opportunity to host events there as well with the kitchen. But again, it's our first chance to be able to get some of that revenue back. I don't think it will take as many years as we think to recoup some of those costs once the events actually start happening. But there will be a bit of a delay before the city starts seeing some of the revenue, hopefully before we need to replace the boiler, which is probably going to be the next largest expense up at Wheeler.
okay. Tom, you had your hand up a moment ago. Tom Chittenden.
I thought I saw somewhere in here that we do have the right to terminate the lease if we give 6 months notice. So there's ways that the 25 years might not happen if we're not happy. Is that true, Tom?
That's correct. I think it's 120 days, Andrew.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Well, that certainly gives us some surety. Thank you, Tom. Tim, were you wanting? No, okay. All right, so are we ready?
I'm sorry, I just did want to say that the pizza oven structure is really beautiful. And I'm really impressed, and I haven't had any pizza there yet, and I'm sorry to say I hope to soon, but it's a great outdoors venue that should generate a lot of interest, and there might be people that want to get married there because, oh my God, there's a view of Mansfield there that just blows your mind, right? So.
Okay, Barb Service, did you want to say something? Yes.
Yeah, I had several comments. The first is I want to thank Tom and Holly and Justin and Carol. We've had some good discussions about the fact that the dog park is going to be adjacent. The document, now I could only look at it on my laptop, but the document that I saw online that was attached to the lease did not clearly delineate the dog park. So I would ask that a different map be attached to this before it's signed that shows really clearly where the dog park is going to be, so that there are just no questions in 25 years when none of us are doing this anymore, that would be really clear. We've had some good conversations, and I was really pleased to see the reference to both the dog park and the community gardens and Veterans Park in terms of not trying to do too many things at once. And into Holly's capable hands, we commend the monitoring of that, working with Carol to get all those things to work out. But I think it would be really helpful if we could attach a different map. And I know that Justin has one. And so it should be easy for him to provide that. And I think that we've come to an agreement about where the dog park is going to be. And I was equally concerned about the community gardens and access to that. So I was glad to see it. I do have a comment about the rental revenue. I personally don't think that 60-40 is correct. If I were doing it, I would say 60 to the city and 40 to Common Roots. But I'm certainly always up for compromise. So I think 50-50 is okay. I have a concern that does Common Roots serve just South Burlington? Or does it serve a larger area in terms of their programmatic services? And are we in fact providing access and welcoming our neighbors from other communities? But do we need to sort of figure out how that all fits in this scenario? But personally, I would be a lot happier, and I think that taxpayers might feel more comfortable if we had a 50-50 split, especially as you talk about boilers. And in 25 years, $10,000 is not going to be very much money at all. And that was my other concern in terms of whether or not that should be a number that's reviewed every X number of years, or it's got some sort of a formula built into it or something, because it's not going to be very much at a point at which there will be more maintenance needs and other things that need to happen at that particular building. So for what it's worth.
Okay, is the 10,000 a minimum? That's how I read it, that we would at least get $10,000.
Correct.
Or is that all we'll ever get? So if it's 40% of the revenue and the revenue is 200,000, let's hope we get a little more than 10,000.
Correct, Helen. It's written as a minimum.
Okay.
Helen, may I weigh in here?
Yes, you may.
I think we have to put this in the context of a little bit of history. When I came in 7.5 years ago as city manager, the National Gardening Association had just left. They were a tenant there, commercial tenant building, and left it in not in great shape. And so it sat there for some number of years. Recall there was an old white house nearby. We tore that down about 5 years ago, and there was some expense associated with that. But the property itself was sitting there and deteriorating. And Common Roots came along and said, along with the Friends of the Library, and said, we would like to lease this from you and start to fix it back up again. And so most of the cost of doing that, as Tom alluded to earlier, has been Common Roots. So they have, and this is a private nonprofit organization, has sunk quite a bit of money into this property. As it relates, and so getting to Barb's points about 60-40, what I would make is that the city has no risk here. Common Roots is taking all the risk and all the events. We don't have to staff it. These are insured events. Common Roots is insured. We, of course, are insured. I personally think 60-40 is pretty good for us. And I think if you look back at where we were with this building and where we are today, it's night and day difference. Tremendous improvements inside. And so since we have no real risk and we're not doing any hosting or staffing or reviewing who's going to do this, I think 60-40 is more than fair. Recognizing that without Common Roots, it would be zero, and we would have a badly deteriorated building. So I was involved in the 60-40 discussion, and I thought that this was fair for the city.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Barb.
Just don't forget the map.
Oh, yes. Is that doable, Andrew, to attach a more correct map or more accurate map?
Absolutely. I do think there was one that Justin produced at some point that we could, I think the motion would just have to include as amended.
So do we need to vote on that? Oh, no, I'm sorry. So is that agreeable for us to, someone make a motion to approve this lease with the understanding that the most accurate map depicting the dog park is attached?
So moved.
And is there a second to that? Tom Chittenden put his thumb up. He's the second.
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call of those in favor or how they vote. Tom Chittenden, that's
Aye.
an aye. Tim Barrett,
Aye.
Dave Kaufman,
Aye.
Megan, Emery?
Aye.
And
Aye.
the chair votes aye. So with that additional map, so the lease agreements have been agreed to 5-0. Thank you for all your work, Holly and Justin and Tom Hubbard and Carol and Katie Langrock and whoever else was part of the conversation, and Andrew, of course. Thank you. All right, item 7 is the annual update from Green Mountain Transit and Jon Moore, who is he the acting general manager? Is that right, Tom?
Is
No?
the official general manager, which is very great for the organization. I think I saw him
Okay.
on.
Has he joined us? I don't see.
I am on. Can you folks hear me?
Oh, yes. Oh, I see. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us. I am Jon Moore. I am the general manager from Green Mountain Transit. I think I saw Charlie Baker on the call as well. He is the board representative from South Burlington. And Tim Barrett is actually the alternate board member representing South Burlington. So I want to give a quick overview of our organization tonight, talk about some specific South Burlington related information, talk a little bit about some ongoing and upcoming projects that the agency is undertaking, and then open it up to any questions you folks may have. So I do have a quick PowerPoint. Kevin, am I able to share my screen?
John, I will make you a presenter. John, you are now a presenter, so you can share your screen.
Okay. Can everybody see that?
No.
No.
Okay. Can you see that now?
Now there's a button at the bottom of the screen. Oh, there you go. There you go.
Okay, great. So just a quick overview of kind of who we are. Green Mountain Transit evolved from the Chittenden County Transportation Authority that was created back in 1973. We are still the only transit authority within the state of Vermont. In 2016, CCTA and the Green Mountain Transit Agency, which operated service down in the Montpelier area, became one organization, renamed the Green Mountain Transit Authority. So overall, GMT provides service in 6 counties in Northwest Vermont. We're directed by a 13-member board of commissioners. And overall, we have about 180 employees, 160 buses, and close to 1,000 bus stops in that 6-county service area. So this is our mission. I won't read this, but everything that's kind of bolded, that's our goal. That's what we're trying to achieve, and bring benefit to the community and really maximize the investment in public transit. So in terms of our financial breakdown, this is a graph of our urban revenues. So we kind of have 2 sides of our business. We have a rural side and an urban side, mostly defined by the Federal Transit Administration, how we get our federal funding. So overall, it's about a $21 million annual operating budget. Over 14 million of that is in the urban area, which is Greater Burlington in Chittenden County. As you can see in FY20, which was kind of a strange year due to COVID and an influx in some federal funds, about 50% of our overall operating revenues came from the Federal Transit Administration, about 14% from the state, 22% from our local partners, which South Burlington is a member municipality of the authority. 12% of our revenue comes from passenger fares. That is artificially low because we have not charged fares since the start of the pandemic. So Q4 of FY20 was fare free. So usually we're closer to 15 to 17% of our revenue coming from our passenger fares. and then a few other miscellaneous revenue categories. So we operate multiple types of service. We operate the fixed route, kind of traditional city bus service. We operate multiple commuter routes in and out of Burlington to some outlying areas. Multiple types of demand response services. The Americans with Disabilities Act. In Chittenden County, we contract with SSTA. You've probably seen the white vans running around. So they provide that service for us. There's an Elders and Disabled program, E&D, that the city contributes to. I'll talk about that here in a second. But that provides service for folks outside of that ADA area, but still need transportation needs. And then in our rural service areas, we also have a contract to provide the non-emergency medical transportation, Medicaid funded services. In Chittenden County, that is provided by SSTA. We also provide weekly grocery shopping trips, seasonal mountain service that we're starting here in the coming weeks in Stowe and down in the Mad River Valley. And also microtransit, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a second, but a new service model that we're going to have a pilot project in Montpelier. So in terms of ridership, I used FY19 figures just because our ridership is skewed fairly heavily due to COVID. We're down about 50% right now from our normal levels. But as you can see, back in FY19, we provided about 2.86 million passenger rides. The vast majority of that is our fixed route service in the Burlington area, Chittenden County. But you can also see we provided urban ADA and urban E&D. And while the ridership numbers are much lower, it is important to note that those are some critical care type services to dialysis and cancer treatments and that sort. So very important services that we provide to those folks that need it. So in terms of some South Burlington specific information, we assess the city on an annual basis, and there's 3 parts to that assessment. The first part is our fixed route assessment. So in FY21, that was $307,000 is what the city paid into GMT. That was a 0% increase over FY20. Typically, there is a 3 to 4% increase. And so for FY22, we'll be our board will be approving our FY22 budget next month. And I would guess that the fixed route increase will be somewhere in that 3 to 4% range. Within that 307,000 is also a small capital match. We have a $50,000 capital match spread out across our communities. So that's built into the fixed route assessment. And that helps us keep our bus fleet up to date. In addition to the fixed route, there's also a ADA component. So the ADA laws basically say any fixed route service, there needs to be complimentary service within 3/4 of a mile around that for folks with disabilities that for whatever reason cannot take the fixed route service. So that amount in FY21 for the city was $189,000. And this is somewhat of a convoluted formula how we get there. But just real quick so folks understand this, because this is a number that can fluctuate based on actual ridership by community. So essentially, our charter gives all of our member municipalities a 50% discount off their actual ADA costs. So in FY21, we had about a $1.34 million ADA budget across our entire urban service area. So we billed 50% of that to our member municipalities, which was about $670,000. And then we allocate that based on actual ridership. So the previous fiscal year, FY19, there were 12,500 rides by South Burlington residents on that ADA service, which represented about 29% of the total rides for that program. So we simply just apply that percentage to the billable expense. And that's how we come up with the annual assessment. So as part of our FY22 budgeting process, we're also developing our FY22 ADA program cost projection. It's a little bit more challenging than normal just due to the COVID impacts. But we do know that South Burlington did see an increase in the total program rides in FY20, which the FY22 assessment amount will be built on. So the rides went from 29% up to 32%. So there may be a marginal increase in the program there, but we'll have that all finalized next month. And then the other piece is the E&D contribution. This is that elders and disabled program. So the state provides 80% of the funding for this program, and the city matches the 20% for a weekly Hannaford shopping special that we operate. That's free to the public, and provided over 2,000 rides in FY20, which averaged about 20 passenger boardings per Tuesday is the day of the week it operates. And that route provides service to Pillsbury Manor, the Pines, and Country Park. So, those folks, have a convenient and easy way to go to the grocery store. The bus waits for them, and, the driver will help load the groceries. So it's a very convenient and customer-focused service that we operate. So in terms of some of the fixed route services that we operate, South Burlington, gets, some pretty high quality service. 3 fixed routes that operate within the city of South Burlington. The Red Line to Williston, which is our second busiest route, over 450,000 boardings in FY19, connecting downtown Burlington, University of Vermont, the Medical Center, U-Mall, out to Taft's Corners in Williston. Receives our highest service levels of 7 days a week and some peak hour 20-minute service. We also operate the Purple Line. This was recently combined. It was a South Burlington circulator, was combined with a College Street shuttle route. So a lower ridership, but with a new combination of service, it does provide direct service from the airport to downtown Burlington and the university area. Previous to this route combination, folks had to transfer at the University Mall. So this is a much more convenient service to have that one seat connection into downtown. And then we also operate our Blue Line to Shelburne route, on Shelburne Road from downtown Burlington out to Shelburne. The busiest stop does happen to be in South Burlington. That's the Farrell Street stop, serving the Shaws and Price Chopper grocery stores and the new the housing developments on Farrell Street. And then we also operate multiple commuter routes through South Burlington, mostly on that Route 7 corridor that folks can get the bus and travel to Montpelier, Middlebury, and Heinsberg. So in terms of initiatives that we currently have underway and are planning on starting here in the near future, number one is technology upgrades. We feel that to incentivize people to get on the bus, they need to have the information, and we think technology can provide that. So we've recently, through the Vermont Agency of Transportation, VTrans, have implemented a new passenger bus tracking application, so they can go on their smartphone and passengers can see real-time location of buses and what the actual arrival times will be. We also have a new mobile ticketing app, so folks don't need to worry about having $1.50 in spare change. They can actually pay with their credit card and use their phone as their proof of fare payment. Both of these products do help improve our on-time performance. And with the technology upgrades, we have a brand new back-end system where we can analyze actual runtime information, and then, with our printed schedules, make sure that they're as accurate as possible. The other project we have ongoing right now is called Microtransit. This is something that we're rolling out in Montpelier in early January. And it's essentially on-demand transit using app-based technology. You can think of it as an Uber or Lyft type service, utilizing public transit vehicles. So in Montpelier, we'll be replacing 3 routes that operate in the city. It will be the first project of this kind in the state of Vermont, but I think everyone kind of in transit in the state has a lot of excitement that this could also, find a solution for that first mile, last mile in low density applications such as Tilly Drive, where there might not be enough demand now for a 40-foot bus to provide that service, but still demand for transportation that this microtransit may be able to efficiently provide. We're also working on a transit strategic plan. This will be our guiding document for the next 10 to 15 years. We'll be starting a public outreach process to make sure that we're meeting the goals of the public. So we're excited to start that process. The other, real focus we've had over the last year or so is making sure that we have a sustainable fleet replacement plan. One of our strongest cost pressures is our maintenance budget. We have a fleet that's older than it should be. So what we want to do is get on a replacement schedule so we can reduce our average fleet of our age. It's much cheaper, especially with federal funds, to buy a bus than it is to maintain it. So we've had 17 new buses delivered since 2017. We have 5 more on order, and our goal is to get on a schedule where we're ordering 5 to 6 buses a year to reduce those maintenance costs and increase the reliability of our service. With that fleet replacement plan, we've also moved to some zero emission buses. We have 2 in service in Burlington, and we're in the process of procuring 2 additional electric buses for Montpelier. So we're excited with the potential of that fleet electrification. We think there could be some long-term cost savings in addition to the environmental benefits. We're also working on our public transit safety plan. This is really a cultural shift from the top down in our organization to make sure we're doing everything as safely as possible. This is a new Federal Transit Administration requirement that we'll have in place in December. And then lastly, just want to outline, like everybody else, spending a lot of time with our COVID response, making sure that we're keeping our employees and our passengers as safe as possible. So we've installed hand sanitizers in all of our vehicles. We have face masks available for passengers as needed. We are operating zero fare right now, as I mentioned. So on our larger buses, all of our passengers can board through the rear door to try to create some social distancing for our drivers. But again, doing everything we can to keep everybody safe while providing, the transportation to those essential services. We have had times, even during COVID, where, we run out of space on the bus. So we have scheduled additional backup buses to provide that backup capacity as needed. But safety is always number one in terms of, making sure people can rely on our services, but do it safely. And that's my contact information there. And with that, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I just have one quick question. I'm assuming that electric buses are more expensive. That's why you only have 2 and the new ones coming in on electric?
Yeah, so the upfront costs are about 40% more, and it's really too early to tell in the technology, life of these buses, what the overall operating savings will be. But it is anticipated that over a 12-year life of a bus, the actual cost of ownership will be less than a diesel bus. It's just that initial hurdle of that upfront capital cost right now is what we're trying to figure out.
Okay. Well, I hope you do figure it out, because that's where I would really encourage you to go. Tim Barrett. Yes, Tim.
Yeah, where are the electric buses running? What routes are they on? I haven't seen them yet.
So they're running kind of all through our system, but we try to maximize the usage actually on the red line, which is North Avenue, and then on the Williston route, and then also on our blue line, which is Essex and Shelburne roads. We have had some, maintenance issues with those buses. We've been a little bit hampered because we put those in revenue service in middle of February, right before the pandemic hit. So we're a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of our maintenance training, but we've had our vendor on site for the last couple of weeks helping out. So they've increased in reliability. But Tim, you should be seeing those definitely in South Burlington.
Does Burlington Electric give you a special rate to charge them at night?
We have a off-peak charging structure, and Burlington Electric also provided some incentive funding. So we have some mileage targets that we're trying to hit, and if we hit those, we'll get some incentive funding from them that help with the actual purchase of the buses.
And are they running as long as you expected them to on a full charge?
Yeah, when we've been able to have them in service, we've been satisfied with the mileage range. Right now, it's just been the overall reliability and keeping them on the road. But yeah, the range has been better than expected, to be honest with you.
Oh. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Dave Shyman, do you have a question? Because you have your picture. No? Okay. All right. So Thank you, John, and congratulations, I guess, on this relatively new job, right?
Yeah, well, thank you. Have a great night.
And we hope you stick around a while. Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to item 8, which is an update on the Winooski Valley Park District, and Nick Warner. Is he, gotta find his name.
Yes.
Okay.
And also,
There you are, right in the center.
yes, and Dave Crawford and Lauren Chicote as well. Excellent. There
Okay,
it is.
great. All right, well, I apologize, we're running a little bit late, but we have you on for, I guess, 20 minutes.
Yes, and we won't drag it out too far. The advantage I have here is everyone on this on the council is aware of who we are, so I won't have to go through our whole history again this year. But,
right.
I do want to give you a quick update. It's been a challenging year for all of us, but we're in much better shape than we might have thought when COVID hit. And basically, after the initial flurry of concern around, frankly, whether we should keep parks open, I don't know if you remember in the beginning, no one was quite sure what the impact of COVID was. We pretty much from the day the governor declared a stay-at-home order, we've been inundated with people. Parks just get absolutely slammed. I'm sure you guys had the same experience, especially at Red Rocks. So it became really clear to us that our number one priority was to be a good host and to make sure that the health and safety of our users was paramount. We made all the same moves that a lot of organizations made in terms of initially closing our offices. Now we're kind of split up. Lauren is working from home. I'm working from home, but I'm a mile from the office. I'm a little bit of a hybrid. And our superintendent, Tim Larned, and his assistant, Remy Kretel, are working out of the office and in the field. We were able to get funding through VHCB to help us get a consultant to get grants for our main tenants, which is the Forest Preschool and the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum. So they were able to get paycheck protection and assistance from the state. So that it was a pretty painless transition. They were able to pay their staff, and they did not have to lay anyone off. On our part, we chose not to hire seasonals, which meant a hell of a lot more work for Tim and Remy this year. We all pitched in. We're all still pitching in, but it's not a sustainable model. But we were able to operate and keep the parks in great shape and mowed and so forth, and with a great reduced staff. We had made a decision pre-COVID to change our model a little bit. We have been pretty heavy in program delivery during the summer with a very successful camp, but we found that the staffing costs and the wear and tear on the facility and the organization generally made us want to look at an outside vendor to come in and do that for us. Then COVID hit. The child care crisis, the demands on the preschool. So we made a choice to convert a space to expand the preschool. So what used to be my office is now the north classroom of the Forest Preschool. We got a special permission to get zoning change. We retrofitted the space. We're able to get a couple of grants and have another grant pending to pay for those changes and upgrades. It's meant everything from accessibility to indoor air quality, air filtration, all that stuff. And along the way, our normal priorities are still going forward. We're completing the conversion of Durway Cove from the former Rivers Edge Marina into a full park with Vermont Community Foundation funding. Tim and Remy were still able to conduct some contracted work for the town of Williston, and which brings in some pure revenue for our organization. And what's really exciting and growing is the Alno-Biwe is a partnership of the four main Abenaki tribes. They have banded together and are creating a Vermont Indigenous Heritage Center co-located at the Ethan Allen Museum that we own and subcontract out to. So that is positioning us with the potential of bringing in a big chunk of change to renovate that facility. And along the way, our partners at the museum, the Association of Africans Living in Vermont, the community gardeners, all have found ways to accommodate and still operate during COVID. It's meant, having, everything from bathrooms to distancing to scheduling has been challenging, but everyone stepped up to the plate. And I also think this new guidance that the governor put out is going to once again boost our usership in parks. We've been really slammed, and we've been doing our best to make sure that people have a safe environment they come into. It's meant signage and education and so forth. And in general, we found people to be really responsive and responsible in using our parks. We still have capital needs that we're looking for outside resources. We want to rebuild our wetlands walk at the homestead. We have renovations we'd like to do at the Ethan Allen Museum and at the Colchester Pond Farmhouse and Barn, because those are both have spaces that are leasable and can provide us income in the long term. So, and also along the way, we were able to expand Colchester Pond Park by 10 acres. We got a donation, a return for a right-of-way for an access road, which long-term will assist us in creating a new north entrance for Colchester Pond. So that was a great deal for us. And we're working with the town of Williston on the transfer of a 29-acre park that was donated to them a couple of years ago. It got held up for a few months because of COVID, but we're jumping back into that and getting an easement for access and turning that into a park district asset. So we're hoping that by the spring that will be completed and we'll have a new park in the system. There's also another property in Colchester that we're looking at on a bargain sale to expand the McRae Farm Park. So things are moving forward. We have found, early on, I got in touch with all the town managers, and in South Burlington, I had a long conversation with Tom Hubbard a few months ago, trying to get a handle on what the financial impacts were going to be on towns. I don't think it's as dire as anyone thought, but also there's unknowns. So we always have that, backline contingency that, we are aware that the town, there are question marks in terms of how cash is going to flow from municipalities, which will have a lot to do with COVID and federal support and so forth. So, we were very cognizant of that situation when we put together our FY22 budget request. And you'll note that we actually show an overall budget decrease, but we're asking for more money from the towns. That may seem like a disconnect. However, the reasons for that are several. One is that because we got out of the programming business, a major fully subscribed camp during the summer that brought in a lot of revenue, we've lost revenues on that side. But on the other hand, we're starting to recapture them with the renegotiation of our lease at Forest Preschool, and which is a major source for us. And we also think the museum is going to start bringing in more money next year with the expansion of their programs. So the system will eventually work to the point that we think we're going to be able to increase our revenues even further, but we were able to really keep a very conservative budget for next year. The budget also assumes that we're going to have full seasonal workers, and if need be, if finances dictate, we can make the same decision we made this year. I hope not, because it did mean that we were not able to accomplish some of our smaller capital projects that we do on our own. But we've been able to obtain a couple of vehicles to replace our aging fleet. We've got them both used. We paid cash. We're carrying no debt. So I got to tell you, I was, when this whole thing started back in March, I was highly concerned about where we're going to land, and we're feeling pretty darn good going into the winter months in terms of where we are financially and operationally. And our general goal is to really focus on our mission in terms of acquiring developing and maintaining high-value conservation lands. And as you know, it's becoming more and more important with global warming and climate change and so forth. And I'm seeing on the horizon potential sources of funding and ways to, including for operations through carbon credits and so forth, that we're studying and that I think will be coming down the pike over the next couple of years. I'm hoping I come back next year and say we found some ways to help fund our parks. Another change is that Lauren Chakotay, who was on the call, has become an operations manager. She was our programs director. And in reality, she's always done a lot of the business work. She took over payroll, so we're saving money by not hiring a bookkeeper. She is really jumped in with both feet in terms of being part of the nuts and bolts of the operation, everything from planning capital acquisitions to negotiating contracts, doing legal work, the whole business. So her experience and skills have really made us a lot more efficient. And Tim Larned continues to do great work as our park superintendent. He's by far the longest tenured. I think he's been around for 15 or 16 years now. So he's really keeping things going. And Remy Kretal is his full-time assistant. We used to have Remy. He's our Swiss Army knife. He's been a camp counselor. He's helped us write grants. This year, I just pulled him aside. I said, you need to work with Tim. He's done, without missing a beat, he's done 100% maintenance and that kind of work this summer. Everything we do is to put us in a position where we don't drop the ball in terms of our goal to provide programming and education, but we work with outside organizations to help bring that into us and use it as a revenue generator, and to find outside resources to complete our capital goals and to continue to keep a very conservative budget and to bring in outside sources of revenue for operations. So that's the quick and dirty. And I spared you a long PowerPoint this year. I can send you lots of cool pictures. We have them everywhere, but we really wanted, in respect for the amount of your packed agenda tonight, and your knowledge of our organization, I wanted to keep it short and then field any questions or concerns you might have.
Well, all the materials that you sent were very helpful. So this is a wonderful way to organize it even in the future when we don't have a packed agenda, but to send the material, we read it, and then this kind of higher level is really helpful, the high points. Are there any questions? You did answer why it's a reduced budget but an increased allocation.
Yes.
So I get that. Are there any other questions anyone has? Okay, well, thank you very much. And we appreciate your work, and I hope that things are different, but it's also just COVID really, I think, reinforced for everyone how important parks are and places to go to be where it's quiet and with nature, and you can do it safely with your family. And so thank you.
You're welcome. And it's created new networks and alliances that I could not have imagined before this happened. It's been just an unintended positive. The statewide, and Holly can speak to this, the park directors and the small land trusts have all banded together. We have regular contact, and I've learned a lot from a lot of other people. So it's not all.
Well, that's great.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
And thank you for your support. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Helen?
Yes. Who is calling?
Dave.
Oh,
Can you hear
Dave.
me?
Yes. Hi. Okay. Yes, I hear you.
Two things. Want to express the thanks of the board, that is the Winooski Valley Park District Board, to the staff. We met at least 2 times, maybe 3, with them to try to get this budget pulled together so there would be a sound budget for the the future and for the present. The second thing is, I want to express my thanks to the board for allowing me to serve on this Winooski Valley Park District Board. It's a great opportunity to link with the Natural Resources and Conservation Commission, and that we appreciate. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Excellent. All righty. So moving on. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
To number 9, which is a briefing on, is Shawn here? Matters related to the school resource officers, bias and other training at the police department. Oh, there he is. Well, welcome, Chief Burke.
Hi there. Good to see everybody.
Good to see you.
Thank you. So I understand you have a full agenda, and in respecting that, I didn't prepare a slide deck because I wanted to get to your questions. But what I'll do is take this apart kind of in 3 pieces, and we can start with school resource officers. Met with the school board last week on this topic, and had a good discussion with them about our role in the schools. As many of you fully understand, that the Youth Service Division of the Police Department dates back nearly 3 decades, and it's had some really talented folks assigned to that. And I would say that it has served as really super strong underpinnings of the relationship between the police department and the citizens of South Burlington. But given all that's gone on in policing in our country, I know that our perspectives, our lived experiences, don't give adequate voice to those marginalized in our community, and it is time to hear from those folks. And I kind of gave that as an idea and a charge back to the school board. They didn't have a lot of input from constituents as of yet as to the school resource officer program in South Burlington. And although we see tremendous value in it, I also feel that this is a great time to listen to all of our neighbors and understand different perspectives on police officers in the school. Just for context, right now, because of a vacancy in the unit, we have 2 officers assigned to the schools. It's working out fine operationally because of the amount of downtime. I say downtime, like the high school students aren't traversing the hallways. They're not casually having lunch. There's not a lot of opportunity socialize the police and establish those relationships in the current model. And there doesn't appear to be a lot of curriculum time in the 5th grade or in the junior high when we usually do the DARE program. So I think we're postured in a way that's sensible given what's going on with the pandemic. It's working well for the school district, and it's certainly working well for the police department. We're kind of a wait and see right now with the infection rate on what brick and mortar school is going to look like in the next semester, when we will have additional staff potentially available for assignment to the school. We would typically have 3 folks as opposed to 2 assigned to the school resource officer program. But that we're going to take a little bit of a wait and see approach and see what's actually needed. Are there specific questions that the council has on the school resource officer program?
Well, I had just one sort of thought about, as you look at your budget and the resources available and the workload and all of the other things that a police department does, is this high enough on the list to continue, in your opinion? Does it generate enough of the outcomes that you're seeking with the program to continue in full speed ahead? Or it's not, it's only 2 officers versus 3, so there's sort of some savings there, I guess. But it's just we're looking at hard questions all across the budget. So I guess that's my question to you. Is this the most important, or one of the top priorities, so that you would never want to cut it?
I don't think it would be wise to do a full cut of a school resource officer program. Right. Again, it's an important way that we socialize the police force in a community. And almost it's really odd, because what you don't want to see is a lot of measurable outcomes that we typically look at in policing, because it's not a crime reduction model. It is simply the school resource officer serves as a member of a multidisciplinary team within the school, serving the needs of that community. And I looked at our data from 2018 to present, in the times that we're actually called in to use our either authority as police officers or to investigate things, are crimes that need the attention of the police. And the rest of the time, the district is really sensible about taking alternative approaches to conduct within the schools that I'm comfortable with. So I think, aside from my assessment of it too, I feel overwhelming support and expectation from the community to having our officers in the school as well. So I know not a clear answer on that, but I feel that we're in a decent spot, but we can always evaluate.
Okay. Megan?
Yeah, just reading the other paper, I have not attended a school board meeting, but it appears that one of the school board members was reading the mission statement of school resource officers and said that it was outdated. And I was curious to know if you knew more about that. There weren't more details given in the other paper, but that this was a statement that was written, decades ago, perhaps 3 decades ago, which is the time frame that you've given to us. I'd just like to know more about what that statement says, what that mission is specifically for school resource officers.
Yeah, certainly what was cited was the job description that is last updated, I think, in 2009. It's old, but it's not on the high liability category of policy that we've been working on. I think I've mentioned before, most of the policies of the police department had last been revised in 2009, 2010, the last time the police department was accredited. We've been working through those, but of course there's been a lot from the legislature, as well as the high liability policies that you have to look at every year that we've been working on. So I think there was a couple of actually just use of terms in that description that were taken a little out of context. One being delinquency. There was a bit of a recoil from that word. And delinquency is a word used in criminal law, whereas an adult commits the crime of simple assault, a juvenile commits the delinquent act of simple assault. So it's not that officers are used in pursuit of these of delinquency as you think of kids misbehaving. It's actually a criminal law reference, but I do feel that there's plenty of room to modernize and make that job description and relevant policy and bring that much more in line with today's practices.
Thank you.
Okay. Tim Barrett? Tim, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Good evening, Chief Burke. Thank you for coming tonight, as I repeat myself again. This issue is a very interesting one, I think, to a lot of people in lieu of what's happened over the last 9 or 10 months nationally. And so, I mean, I asked this question in one of the previous council meetings, and I think that some of us were surprised to learn that the city budget pays for those officers in the schools. And that is correct, right?
That is correct, sir.
Right. And so, and you are there at the request of the school board principally?
So this partnership definitely predates myself. And, I don't know if it was any single person's or board's request, but it is a relationship that we have with the school district. How the funding scenario came to be, I'm completely unfamiliar with.
I really urge the school board in the city, and especially you, Chief Burke, to work closely with the school board to do a complete top to bottom review of the need for SROs. I feel like it's a remnant from a past era that may not have the value that we think it has. And unless somebody can show me some data that it really does have a value, other than intangibles, I have to wonder whether it's outdated and we just don't need it anymore. And I know that people can have a lot of reactions to a statement like that saying, but oh, we need the protection of the police in the schools because of all the school shootings that we've seen over the last 10 years, or, this is how we socialize, the school population with respect to police. And my response to that is, I think the school board needs to do a deep dive on the requirements for the SRO program to determine whether they really want it or whether they actually need it. And then the question is, does the city want to, in fact, pay for it? Because we are paying for it. So I encourage everybody involved to look very closely at this because I think it deserves more attention than it's gotten in the last few years.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Marcy, Murray, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Helen. I just wanted to say that our youngest graduated 4 years ago, but I think one key benefit of having these exceptional officers in the schools is that a lot of kids grow up just thinking, oh, I can trust these folks. They're the people that go into the schools, the officers, at least in my kids' experience, are really such great people. And so I think that does give a benefit in terms of, being more willing to reach out to the police if you need help. And so just wanted to say that I appreciate that. I also appreciate the chief's openness to, people of color, supporting their needs, things like that. So thank you.
Okay. Do you have any comments, Chief Burke, in relationship to Councilor Barrett's thinking? I mean, would you be amenable to that kind of deep dive? And, maybe there's some new aspects of SROs that people haven't thought about that could be utilized, or in fact, it's from another decade and, we do something different.
Certainly, I'm open to whatever the community would like, ma'am. And in that vein, I just want to be crystal clear that I've never been an advocate that a school resource officer program serves any greater security need in the moment of crisis as opposed to the absence of one. There's no data nationwide to suggest that some of these mass acts of violence only occur on campuses absent the police. That's simply not true. But what I do see going on in this policing crisis in America is police departments that don't have a close enough relationship with the communities they serve. And then when we see a video from afar and folks have questions about police conduct in their own jurisdiction, they fill that vacuum with all kinds of speculation as to what their police are up to. And not that only a school resource officer program can fill that vacuum, but I think it is those type of program community-based policing models that help on top of the good relationship-based policing that we do in the field every day. But again, I'm open to whatever the needs of South Burlington are. And I think a good deep dive on this at a tough fiscal time is only logical.
Okay.
I just have to respond to that. Helen, I just have this weird opinion about this. And I'm sure, I might not be right, but we don't have the fire department going into the schools as a fire department, resource officer. We don't have public works going in as a public works resource officer. And maybe I'm off base with trying to make that comparison. We don't have, Kevin's City Hall people going in to be resource officers. I just don't understand what the model is. The kids go into school for education and they go in for, they have guidance counselors, they have teachers, they have administration, they have social workers. The question in my mind is, what is the value add to having a police officer in the school? Why does a kid need to have the socialization of the police in the school? So that's what really I don't understand. And I haven't thought about this much until the last 6 months. And so that's why I want the school board to think about what the requirement is for the school to actually have. And I'm sure the officers do a great job and they represent very well for the city. I have no doubt about that. But the question is, what is the real value in the school for having them there? And if there is no real value because the data doesn't show it other than a feel-good situation, then the school board needs to evaluate whether they actually need to be there. And then maybe they don't need to be there and we'd redeploy those officers somewhere else.
Well, I guess I would just point out that what I think I just heard the chief say is that he feels there's a real value to the police department in having a better understanding of this portion, I guess, of our population. Did I misconstrue what you said, Chief Burke?
No, I don't think so. And again, I take Councilor Barrett's remarks very seriously, and I think those are great questions. But I would say that the fire department's not empowered the way the police are in terms of the work that we do in enforcing the law and up the Constitution, and nor is Public Works, nor is the city manager's office. We also do bridge a lot of services, wraparound services to kids that maybe have troubled homes. If we're at a domestic violence call tonight at a home and there's some kids that are attached to that family, maybe even physically present, via the SRO, we can get the school counselor wrapped in to those kids. And could that be done in other ways? Probably. Would it be as efficient and as meaningful because of the relationships and the small knit nature of the community? Maybe not. But again, I think these are all good questions to kind of vet. But I just want to leave you with policing in terms of everything that's under your charge as a city council is a lot different than firefighting and Public Works and the manager's office.
Okay, Tom, and then there's a couple other topics that the chief was going to speak about.
I think
Tom,
we're all saying the same thing. I just want to make clear, I don't think Councilor Barrett's saying is we would never want police in the schools ever. I think he's just questioning the full-time dedicated FTE of a police position to be in the schools every day. And it sounds like you're saying you're open to those discussions as well as we look at calibrating what the community is. So the firefighters go in and do fire safety week, we have the same thing. So it's not like nobody's saying we don't want cops in schools. What we're saying is how much do we need police officers in schools and in what form?
okay, fair enough. Shawn, you also were going to give us an update or a little information about sort of the bias training and at the police department. So unless someone has another comment or thought about the SROs, are we done with that? Okay, thank you.
Certainly. So this year for fair and impartial policing training, we did the state mandated training, which I think I've remarked about before, was a policy review and a slide deck on data collection and data quality. That type of training is not educating our staff to the dynamics of implicit bias nor systemic racism. And that was the primary driving factor that led us to partner with the Vermont State Police and bring in Dr. Eitan Nessenrado-Longo and a viewing of the documentary 13th. We did that in July. Every employee at the police department in the month of July, through the course of 2 screenings, saw the documentary, and then we had a facilitated discussion afterwards. What's really fascinating about the documentary the 13th is that there's chapters upon chapters of history on systemic racism in our country and the intersect of the criminal justice system. And, as a 25-year cop, until I saw that documentary, I didn't really have a good handle on that. And I feel as though that we should be teaching cops, having events like this in basic training. So you have a good understanding of why large segments of the community don't trust the police. And, our staff responded really well to that training, walked away, again, more learned. And what cops look for is evidence. And historically, when we've had cultural competency training, a lot of it has been adversarial. Cops don't understand it because they're like, I'm a good person. I went through this rigorous hiring process, a polygraph examination. I was raised by good people. I try to do the right thing every day. Now suddenly I'm being called a racist. Well, until you understand the history and how systemic racism lives in our country, it's very difficult to reconcile that. And I feel as though that training in implicit bias in racism in our country is very helpful in that regard. what we've also done is partner with Dr. Seguino at UVM. We're doing a little deeper dive on our traffic stop data. Dr. Seguino does some really fascinating work, but because the sample set is pretty small, Dr. Seguino has to use about 5 years worth of data. And although we're seeing improvements in some of our outcomes in terms of racial disparity, again, on the 5-year average, it doesn't really give you like when did these increases or improvements start to happen? What's happening today? Are there outliers? Things that we can address here and now. So we're starting to have her examine that data at the officer level, and then that'll inform conversations that we can have internally with staff. So people can have, again, this information, this education, officers can have that information when they're formulating decisions that they're making in the field. And I think that's going to be very, very valuable. Lastly, we had a very generous offer from a South Burlington resident who does a lot of racial equity work for the UVM School of Medicine. She has offered to conduct some racial equity workshops for us in calendar year 21. So we plan on having her in early January, February of 21 in order to bolster our fair and impartial policing training and education efforts. I recently attended one of her seminars that she held for the Vermont Department of Health. Again, a lot of it is on history, like how certain neighborhoods came to be, you know, through even mortgage lending, how some people were afforded opportunities that BIPOC communities were not. And from a police perspective, it's very fascinating because, especially in urban areas, not so much that we see in South Burlington, but in pockets we do, of why folks live in a certain neighborhood, why crime may behave in a way that it does, and then how the police maybe historically have over-policed certain areas. So again, looking forward to that opportunity. Again, it's more of an education to give officers the relevant context that they need to understand, you know, what is a watershed moment in policing in our country in terms of race and racial relations.
So it sounds like this training is ongoing. I mean, it's sort of, you keep increasing or adding or making the conversation more rich.
Yes, ma'am. So, you know, one thing that drove me nuts, and I didn't really understand it, Curtis Reed helped me understand it a little bit a few years ago, a little bit better. You know, cultural competency has this check the box feel, and that's not doing the work. You know, I like, Curtis uses the term cultural humility. I use cultural fluency now, but again, this is evolving, ever changing. And when you look at the demographics of Chittenden County, we have growing numbers of new Americans, and every time that we welcome a new culture, that's a new lived experience in terms of what their relationship was with government, how maybe even they were treated here, on top of our own history here in our country. And I feel as though that it has to be an evolution. And there, you know, and Aton says this too, it's not a sprint, this is a marathon. We just have to keep up the good work, making sure that we're giving voice to our marginalized neighbors. And, you know, from a police perspective, we do this job to provide the best possible service that we can to citizens. And this is an important part of it.
Have there been changes that the legislature made that you've had to sort of retrofit into your training or consciousness?
Not sweeping changes recently. So the last legislative efforts led to the fair and impartial policing training and model policy that we have in place now. And again, those are easy metrics to satisfy. We're going above and beyond that here in South Burlington. And I feel as though that there'll be traction in that on that road on the state level. And in fact, we have Lieutenant Jaeger with South Burlington that serves on the Fair and Impartial Police Policy and Education Subcommittee of the Vermont Criminal Justice Training Council. It's a multidisciplinary team, a lot of stakeholders from around the state. They began their work right around the time the pandemic started, but they hopefully will formulate a curriculum that will be available statewide, so you won't have individual police agencies out trying to figure this out on their own.
Mm-hmm. Megan?
Thank you, Chief. I heard you talk about fair and impartial policing, and that is something that a group of residents have contacted me about and asking what our police are doing in order to execute that policy. They brought to my attention that Winooski has a specific policy on fair and impartial policing, with regard to not inquiring into immigration status if it is not germane to the situation at hand. And so I'd like to know more about what our police department is doing with regard to that.
Sure. I think I worked with that group actually that spoke with you on this, and they do like the Winooski model. The Winooski model was very, very similar. Obviously, we're all bound by the tenets of the state policy. The Winooski model was very similar to ours. We did go through it with a fine-tooth comb. And what we found was an over-reliance on what's called the slavings clause in the policy, which clearly states when we have to cooperate with the federal authorities. And it was mentioned in the policy probably in 5 or 6 different sections. So after going through it with those folks and with conferring with our city attorney's office, we did publish a new policy that relies on the reference to that clause once, and we also nuanced some of the language to bring it more in line with what, I don't want to say with the Winooski policy, because the Winooski policy might run afoul of the federal law, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but I feel as though we made some improvements there. But again, that's another policy either on a local level or through legislation that's going to go through constant review and evolution, as it should. I will say that here in Chittenden County, police organizations have had fair and impartial policing policy in place that has really respected the idea of not inquiring to immigration status. It's just not in our line of work.
David, chime in?
Hello. Thank you, Chief Burke, for that explanation. I'm part of that committee, the Fair and Impartial Policing Policy in South Burlington, and we will be bringing a proposal to the City Council and hope to be talking with you again further, because you did reduce the number of instances in which you include that one phrase that enables collaboration with ICE and with deportation agencies. And you reduced it from 5 or 6 to 1, but it's still 1. So it's in the document, and we want to talk to you some more about that to see if we can move forward in a way that changes the position that South Burlington takes with respect to ICE. So we'll be back to you.
Certainly understood. And, just as a kind of a placeholder there, I mean, that is a federal law, and in policing and criminal justice, there is a sense of maintaining the rule of law, and there is also some potential fiscal concerns with that, because especially under the outgoing, I guess it's the outgoing administration, there were certainly some high hurdles to get over in terms of securing grant opportunities from the federal government if your policy ran afoul of cooperating with the federal government to the minimal extent of the law. And that's where our policy is right now. It limits our responsibility to the federal government to the minimal standards that we have to, but very interested to hear about a new perspective on it, and to carry that forward to the city attorney's office for further contemplation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have just one last question, and maybe this is the wrong time to ask it, but I'm just curious if, the force gets this training and you work on having it become just the way one polices. And if you find someone who doesn't, makes a mistake or doesn't follow or shows the kind of bias that you thought you trained them out of, sort of. What's your follow-up? How do you then, I mean, is there a, yeah, what's the next step? I mean, you're all kind of, we all are sort of learning to move forward and kind of make this part of how we address others.
So would the question be, what would we do if a officer or employee were to conduct themselves in violation of policy?
Yes, yeah.
We would investigate that. We would come to some level of findings, and then depending on the conduct, could be a whole host of outcomes. There could be a retraining component. There could be a punitive component. It all really depends on what is sustained to have been the violation. And is the violation simply a one of policy, or does it run afoul of one of our conduct rules, which always enhances the punitive measures imposed?
Okay, so this training you've embodied in your rules and regulations, is that right?
So training curriculum doesn't live within policy. We train to our policy, but it allows us, our training curriculum, to be more fluid, to add to it. So if we were just going to do the state bare minimum, we would have reviewed our policy, reviewed the slide deck on data quality, check the box and move on. But we want to be in a better place as professionals, and certainly as officers, or all of our employees, sworn or non-sworn, serving citizens. And I know how important that work is to our constituents. And that's why we have this additional education. Now, if someone were to just suddenly pop up on the radar as being explicitly biased in their enforcement, that would certainly be cause for great concern, be cause for investigation, and to figure out what that employee needs. And that's, again, a broad range of potential outcomes. What I really feel the disservice has been historically with this type of training is, again, not giving the officers the education as to why we see racial disparity in outcomes where they're measured. Education, housing, criminal justice. It's because there's racism in society. And once cops understand that we are just functioning in an environment where bias and systemic racism is afoot, it's easier to understand that I'm not sinister. I'm part of a system that's a little broken. I need to learn more about this so I, the professional, can start making different decisions when warranted.
Okay. Yes, you're not Larry, but
Hi,
I'm not Ted. I forgot to change the name.
I'm Susan Schoenfeld, using Larry Kupferman's computer. So I was part of the original group that met with Chief Burke about the fair and impartial policing policy. I first want to say how much I appreciate the training that you're seeking on implicit bias for people, because you had mentioned to us that you didn't feel like the state training was preparing people to work well with the policy. So I appreciate that work. And just to clarify for others, we did have that discussion about the savings clause that had been referred to throughout the document. And then there's a paragraph at the end with the savings clause saying that there was a level of required communication with immigration. And that has been, that federal guideline has been challenged in courts across the country and by police departments across the country as something that states are saying or municipalities are saying they won't do. Ended up in some courts with some preliminary decisions, as far as I understand, that saying that it's illegal for the administration to cut funding. And what Winooski did was take the specific reference to the savings clause out and saying a paragraph that nothing in this policy is meant to go against federal law. So just leaving it more general. And our concern was the more you mention that policy, the savings clause in that, but even having it in there raises the question about, gee, is this an exception? And we're really feeling there shouldn't be exceptions, other than, as if there's actual criminal criminality involved that's not related to immigration status. So that's what we'll be looking at more. And hopefully, with the change of administration that we're having, the concern about that federal pressure on the federal threat about finances will be off the table, and we can really more strongly, in the strongest wording possible, make it very, very clear about the separation for anybody who's on the learning curve about it within the service. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Susan. Okay. Are there any other comments, Chief Burke, that you would like to make, or any other questions from the council? Well, good. Okay, thank you for, it looks like we have, continued or future conversations about the SROs to ponder and consider, and you're continuing your work on bias training and institutional racism, and good for you. Yeah, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 10 is receiving the proposed LDRs. LDR 17-13A and LDR 17-13B and LDR 19-06 and LDR 20-18A from the Planning Commission, and consider warning a public hearing on those 3 items. So Paul Connor, welcome.
Hi, folks. Should be pretty quick tonight. We, as Helen just read off, there are 4 amendments that are proposed that were approved unanimously by the Planning Commission. 2 of them relate to lot coverage along Shelburne Road and a small portion of Williston Road. This addresses a question that was brought to you in the spring by Bill Shearer, but is also looks a little more holistically at options that a number of property owners would be able to take advantage of. It opens up some additional options for small open spaces in city center, which we found has been a little bit of a challenge. And it also moves us one step a little bit more digital than we have been by eliminating the need for paper copies of plans, which we haven't received in about 7 months anyway. So happy to go through any of these tonight or to make a more thorough presentation at your hearing if you're willing to hold a hearing. We've tentatively scheduled it for actually your next meeting, December 7th, because there's 3 weeks between regular meetings here. We were able to put it on for that meeting if you're so inclined.
Okay. I just have a suggestion. It was a lot of reading and I went through it, and I'm lucky I sort of have Ted that I can say, so what does this mean? And sometimes he remembers, and sometimes frankly, he's like, oh, I don't know. I probably should ask Paul. But just in the the presentation, it's a lot of information, and I'm just I'm just concerned that the public doesn't always and I consider myself the public, can't easily follow both the legalese language, that's the red line stuff, and then you have to kind of read through that, and then you wait till the end, and you give very clear kind of Reader's Digests, this is what this means. And I'm just wondering if when it's presented to the public, if you can have right next to the language that you're changing and crossing out, your language that's not part of the draft, but it's like, this is what this means in clear English. So I don't print stuff off. I got it on the screen, so I'm going back and forth to try to find this stuff, and it's very time consuming. And I don't work, so I have the time. But I think of the other 4 counselors, and they all have full-time jobs, and then there's the public who may or may not listen in to any of the planning commission meetings. You know, they don't hire lawyers to keep them up to date on exactly what is happening. So I'm just sort of asking for some, maybe I'm the only one who needs this, but an easier way to sort of track the changes and clearly understand what the language means, like the pros and the cons or something.
Sure,
Just
we can definitely work on that. The report that's at the end tries to capture some of that, but your point is taken about making that more directly right next to it. And what we've done starting about 2 years ago was to break out each amendment into its own section. So there's no reason that we can't have a staff summary at the beginning of it and say, here's what this amendment is supposed to be doing. Happy to do that. And if you'd like, we can even put it in for the hearing in a couple weeks into your packet for that.
I would love it to be for the hearing so that we and the public can read that ahead of time. Because I know you'll answer all our questions, but it's just good for me to read it and think about it and then ask questions. That's just, I work better that way. Megan and then Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Helen, for your comments. And I would also like to know what the urban overlay district looks like, where it is. That was something that was missing for me, in addition to what Helen had to say. I'm thinking I understand, but I'm not sure unless I actually see it.
Yeah,
sure. We'll include a map. Just for the purposes of tonight, I'll describe it as being the length of Shelburne Road and the portion of Williston Road that is in and around the Guild and Kinney's. That commercial section there, but we can show a map and do that more for yourself and for others reading it. That's good feedback. Thank you.
That'd be great. Tom, I'm sorry. Tom, I'm sorry. You have some more. Excuse me. Go ahead, Megan.
Well, since he gave us the geographical location, so this would allow commercial properties to use TDRs to expand?
That is correct. So properties that are in the commercial/residential district, yes. There are some properties on there that have chosen to be residential, and that's fine. But it would allow these properties to get a little bit more lot coverage, meaning more percentage of the lot has something other than greenery on it, by either A, purchasing TDRs, or B, transforming a portion of the parcel into some kind of a active use space for either the tenants or their customers or the public as sort of a pocket park. To turn something that might just be grass into something that's attractive and useful to users of the property. So those are two separate options.
Okay, Tom?
So I was just going to say to your point, Helen, I really love the reports at the end because I can never understand the red line version of the documents. And I trust the process because we're going to warn this now for like a month out, that I'm really counting on the public, all interested parties to really scrutinize this and to inform us, the counselors, of where they see concerns. But I love the reports at the end because it really does highlight the key things that I just can't extract from the red line. And I'm not married to a planning commissioner, so I don't have that luxury either.
Yeah, but I'd still like them closer together. So it's right there. That would help me. I mean, just the Reader's Digest version. And so as I was reading through this, so that I understand some of them, you have, the other thing that got me confused was all the different SEQ acronyms. I mean, I sort of figured them out, but there were like 5 of them. And so it sounds like, and I know it just is, I used to be that way in healthcare, and it's really easy once you become facile with all the acronyms to just spin them out and you know exactly what you're talking about. But so it sounds like you have expanded the use of TDRs to those overlay districts. And then you have made something smaller. You can use less of them in the southeast quadrant?
No, for this round of amendments, the planning commission opted
just was
to
expanding?
leave the TDR program in the southeast quadrant exactly as it is,
Okay, okay.
but to create a new opportunity for somebody to, for the first time, purchase them from the southeast quadrant and use them somewhere else in the city.
So-
And
So that's my question right there.
Okay, so the southeast quadrant is still a receiving, it's a sending and a receiving area.
unchanged from previously, yes.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, so what is the quantifiable measurement in the TDR as it applies to lot coverage increases that would be in the new receiving area?
Yep.
I
Sure,
didn't
so,
understand that.
Is that all you didn't
In
understand?
the southeast quadrant, a TDR is equal to one dwelling unit in terms of when you build, so one house. And in terms of the amount of land that you have to conserve, it's 0.83 acres. And that it has that awkward number because 0.83 acres is the inverse of the density throughout the southeast quadrant, which was decided a long time ago to be 1.2 dwelling units per acre. So today, in order to move one house to a receiving area, you must conserve 0.83 acres. The draft would translate that same metric into stating that for any amount of lot coverage that you increase up to 10,000 square feet of additional lot coverage, you must conserve 0.83 acres. So that's the translation there. So approximately a quarter acre of additional lot coverage in the along Shelburne Road can be purchased for conserving 0.8 of an acre, roughly, rough numbers there.
And is that why you struck in the definition of the TDR the qualification as being a housing unit measurement?
Correct, because once it's still a housing unit in the southeast quadrant, but elsewhere in the city, it needs to be something else because it isn't, the thing being received isn't homes, it's lot coverage. And state law allows for lot coverage, building bulks, things like that. So this is a little bit of a pilot program for future changes to the LDRs that, as we know, the TDR committee had made more substantial recommendations. This is an opportunity to test it out, to see what the market is interested in, and we will certainly have additional amendments coming forward in the not too distant future on this.
So if you combine a TDR, you could end up, and the fact that there's no parking minimum now for commercial properties, right? They really could extend their lot coverage quite a bit, right?
Well, the lot coverage can go up 10 percentage points.
Yeah.
You're correct that there is no parking minimum
But,
for
of course, it needs to-
non-residential uses.
Right.
So conceivably, but building coverage does not go up under this proposal. It's only lot coverage.
Lot coverage, okay.
So the amount of building on your property doesn't actually go up. So it's not likely tilting it that much in that direction.
Okay.
Tom? Are you done, Tim?
Yeah, thank you.
Tom?
Just so we're all clear, this is actually creating a relief valve, so to speak, because it's allowing some development that otherwise was bottled up in the SEQ to now be to be channeled out to our transportation districts or overlay districts. So it's a good thing.
I think that's a fair assessment, and I might even describe it, Tom, as saying it's opening up an opportunity for those who have
Have them to sell them.
who have not been able to sell them. It's creating more of a market opportunity for those who are looking to sell them.
Okay. So it sounds like we sort of went over most of them already in some extent. So, and you're going to give us some maybe even more clear description for a public hearing on December 7th. So our only action, I think, is if we wish to set a public hearing on December 7th at a time certain, like 7:30 or something.
7:30 would be our recommendation if that works for you
Okay.
all.
Would someone like to make that
I will
motion?
move that we hold a public hearing on December 7th at 7:30.
Second.
I will second. Yeah.
Okay, is there any further discussion on that? Okay, all in favor, I think you can just do a thumbs up for this. I have 5 thumbs up. Okay, that was
right.
unanimous then. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you. Okay, Justin is back on tap for 3 items. Hello. Item 11 is Kimball Avenue, the bridge update.
Yeah, so I'll do the macro and then probably the thing that's of more interest to folks, the micro. The overall project, which is to replace the failed culvert of a couple of years ago, it continues to be on track despite the state withdrawing one of the grants, at least in this grant cycle. Hopefully they'll reinstitute that source of funding and we can just reapply next year for that revenue source. We're on track to bid the project over the winter and then construct it in the spring, summer. And just so folks that kind of don't remember what things were like before they had the joy of the temporary bridge, we're just going to be putting a very large culvert down at the base of the Muddy Brook and just topping that with all sorts of soil and backfill. And in due time, you'll just be riding over a normal road and you probably won't even realize what's well underneath you, which would be the new box culvert we're going to be installing. It's very similar in design and functionality to the culvert we put in on Market Street just prior to that large project happening a couple of years ago, except it's just bigger because the span is bigger and the Muddy Brook at this location is more active than tributary 3 of Potash through City Center. So, and the we in this is a joint effort between South Burlington and Williston, in which South Burlington, through our stormwater division, is running the project, and we are sharing all cost 50-50 with the town of Williston. Williston has bonded for their full share of the project. So even though they were anticipating the grant to help offset the need to pull the full bond, they have all the money available to them through a bond their public voted on a couple of years ago. So we're all set to go with the large project. Now, how do we survive without pulling our collective hair out for the next few months is probably of greater interest to people tonight. As you all know, we recently tried to repave the bridge. These bridges are akin to kind of an erector set. They are owned by the state of Vermont, and they were deployed vastly after Hurricane Irene. The nature of the bridge is one that, given that's designed to be temporary, it cannot hold more than an inch thickness of asphalt. And again, these are all just metal plates that kind of sit on and lock into each other. So there's probably 30 different metal plates that comprise this whole bridge, as opposed to a standard bridge that you'd see on the interstate that has one, two, or maybe 3 large sections. So that's 30 different periods of live loads that our vehicles are kind of rattling. And with only an inch of pavement, there's no practical way for that pavement to stay in place with any degree of success or longevity. Further compounding matters, the state does not want us. Normally, I'm sure you've seen driving around right before a road's about to be paved, there's a thin black liquid that's sprayed down on the road. That's called a tact coat or a binding coat, and that helps the asphalt adhere to the surface it's being put on. Well, in this case, you don't want to put that on a bridge that's going to eventually be taken apart and put back into storage, because I don't even know if you could remove that tack coat from the bridge, but the state does not want their bridge kind of marred with this surface. Right. The state, and Williston, myself, and the state have been going around for a few weeks on this. They do not pave these bridges. They're generally deployed in the more rural areas of Vermont, where unpaved roads are kind of the norm, and slower speeds are more prevalent. They don't pave them. We paved it initially due to concern, particularly with the bicycling community, of even though these bridges technically are quote skid resistant, it's one thing if you're in a car. Skid resistant is an entirely different thing if you're riding a bicycle on a wet metal bridge deck. Coming from Williston into the bridge, you have horizontal and vertical curvature, and it's fair to say some pretty high speeds. The good news is coming from South Burlington, you're immediately having just passed through a four-way stop. So there's not a lot of speed going on. Where we are collectively, and I have a phone call with Williston tomorrow morning, is we believe we're going to come forth with a recommendation, perhaps at your December meeting, to remove the pavement, leave the bridge deck as the travelable surface, but in a way to mitigate the potential hazard of high-speed traffic, we would be installing temporary stop signs on each side of the bridge. At this point, there's three options. One, continue to drive over what we have today. And that's all well and good if you're going 15 or 20. Beyond that, it's not that great. Two, to do as I just mentioned, peeling off the asphalt, putting up stop signs to eliminate kind of speed as a hazard. Or three, just close it. And I consider three off the table. Close it until it's fixed. So, for the next 7 months, that's not something any of us want to deal with, nor does the state, because they have the parallel facility on Route 2 that would have to now handle all this traffic. So right now, our opinion is option 2. After much consternation, this is kind of the lesser of all evils, the option 2 of peeling off the asphalt and putting up temporary stop signs on each side of the bridge is the proper way to go. Williston, their meeting schedule just happens to be Tuesdays instead of Mondays. They're having this exact same discussion tomorrow, after which we're going to regroup. And as I mentioned, hopefully come back to the council with a formal recommendation, because we would need you to adopt a traffic regulation for the stop sign at a December meeting.
So just a quick question for you. The stop sign, everybody's used to not stopping. How are you all of a sudden going to get people to start paying attention to a stop sign?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So the existing stop sign just above it, when we put that in, many people, I don't think you were on the council then, David, many people had the same question. So what you'd like to do with new traffic control devices is you want to draw attention to them. There's a few ways of doing that. You've probably all seen the little orange flags up at 45 degrees on top of each of the right-hand corners of the stop sign octagon. Another way to do it is we have a blinking red light that's on top of the four-way stop at Community and Kimball. That light can be moved to the stop sign just up the street, the new stop sign we would be installing to drop
That
people.
answers my question. That should do the job. Thanks.
Yep. We also have, Williston has 2 variable message boards. We would deploy one on each side of the bridge, alerting folks of the new traffic pattern ahead, as is standard.
Yeah, I think that sounds very reasonable. I mean, I went over it this weekend and I slowed down and it wasn't a big deal. I didn't even think it was that cruddy. I just drove slowly. So, good. Okay, item 2 is the dog park update.
Yeah, so we plan on either later this week or early next week finalizing a plan, well, the plan's finalized, but finalizing an application to submit to planning and zoning. In talking with, and I'm looking at the thing, Larry's still on here. Larry Kupferman is the chair of the dog park committee. Larry and I were emailing today, and we think it's best. Our next dog park committee meeting is December 1st at 6 o'clock at night. So we thought it would be best to bring that final plan to the committee to have them review, edit, or bless its submission as a permit to the city.
Okay.
At which point it enters in, which point, well, yeah, right now the plan as presented captures all of the comments that was made at our last meeting, which was on the first Tuesday in October. So the plan is respectful of the committee's most recent round of input. I'm sure there'll probably be some minor tweaking, but if there is, that won't slow us down at all. And then at that point, we submit to planning and zoning, and the determination of whether it's an administrative or a DRB review becomes their decision to make.
Right.
But all of that puts us well on path to, regardless of what our permitting path is with planning and zoning. The plan has been, I don't want to say all along, but certainly since the pandemic, slowed things down to construct this in the spring.
Great.
So
Sounds good.
we're well on track for that.
Excellent.
Okay. The next item, 13, Dorset Street traffic signals update. Oh,
Yeah, so
Barb, did you want to say something? Barb Service?
I just wanted to say, yay, thank you very much. I know this has been a really long process. It's been forever. And Larry and Justin and Holly and Betty and Kate and Molly, and I'm leaving out people, but thank you very much for your commitment to making this happen.
Oh, I agree. Thank you all. Okay. And now the traffic signals on Dorset Street.
Yeah, so we've been formally underway for quite some time. You may have noticed, actually I know one person on this call did because they sent me an email, but you may have noticed we've had some field personnel out doing survey work and kind of identifying where new infrastructure is going to go. We're working with, coincidentally, a South Burlington firm, Stantec Consulting, is helping us put this package together. We've already implemented a few of what I would kind of refer to and what Kevin was urging me, understandably so, some of the lower hanging fruit measures. We've made some changes at Garden Street or the Healthy Living intersection. And I believe the last time I was on with the council, there's some reference to the work we did at the intersection of Williston and Dorset to reduce the delay, to essentially limit what a lot of people correctly thought was an unnecessarily long green time for westbound Route 2 at that intersection. That was due to a faulty pedestrian call. So every time it went around the cycle, even if there wasn't a pedestrian there, it thought there was a pedestrian. So it activated that cycle, which if you don't have a pedestrian, it just adds to delay. And the last thing we need at this location is just more unnecessary time added to people's waits. We also just installed at Market Street, kind of the first, the best way to describe it is the first counter that's going to start becoming, and we were looking at the dashboard today. It's pretty interesting stuff in our world. We're starting to capture real life counts and volumes that we will eventually be able to use as an input to an algorithm that will be that can spit out kind of constantly updating traffic control signal plans. As I'm sure you're aware, traffic controls, they can have time of day plans, but a large amount of them, you essentially go out to the signal, you program it, and you just let it run. It will not change its operations until you go back out and reprogram it. So it always requires kind of human intervention. And oftentimes you need to have data to support the decisions you're making, and you can be spending $2,000 to $3,000 just understanding what your volumes are and who's going where. And that's just at one intersection. And we have 6 intersections in this corridor. So by installing these cameras that can actually do the counting and the thinking for us, and again, we have one out in Market, and what I'll do through the city manager is I'll just send out a couple little snapshots of the data that's available. And once we start utilizing this data throughout the corridor, again, back to our timing plans, the signal can be adjusting on the fly. We still have the ability to set whatever parameters we want, but the signal can operate within those parameters we set, and it can adjust on the fly to the real life conditions. And as an example, if for some reason it loses data or it loses power, or when the computer resets itself, it has a senior moment and it's Tuesday at 3, what it will do is it will take the last 6 Tuesdays at 3, the last 6 sets of data it has for Tuesday at 3 o'clock, and it will use that. So even if it loses itself for a moment, the data library we're going to be able to build will allow it to continue to think in relative real time. So pretty good.
I want
interesting,
one of those
fun-
for my senior moments.
So that's just some of the lower hanging fruit improvements we've been doing this season, and as all along the plan is, next construction season to be doing kind of the major overhaul. And what that means is, for example, at both ends of the project at Kennedy and Williston, a decent amount of our signal heads are supported by strain wires, and what that means is every time, not every time, but the wind's always kind of blowing in Dorset Street. So your signal pole, your signal head's kind of doing this. And eventually, after the 50,000th time it does that, some wire or nut somewhere back in the chain, and it gets loose and it causes a problem that takes us forever to troubleshoot because there's 4 miles of wire. So this is just a way of saying, by putting in kind of mast arms that you're used to seeing at more intersections, nice big steel metal mast arms. We're going to reduce the likelihood that we'll have kind of ongoing and regular mechanical equipment failures due to wind. So just a bunch of the stuff we're doing. It's not too dissimilar to what the state's doing on Route 7 right now and what they've done recently on Route 15 in Essex, Route 2A in Williston. It's same type of project, and we have those folks working with us as well from the state.
Great. Any questions or comments?
I just want to say that the work that the state did on 2A was amazing. I mean, it took really 3 years. They had to relocate all the utilities, widen the road, put in those mast arms for James Brown Drive. I mean, it was a huge undertaking, and I'm sure it wasn't cheap, but traffic flows really well there now, and it's much safer for people wanting to turn at that intersection. And there's a lot of use of the crossing signal there now, even though it's Williston, I know. But I'm just giving a little bit of credit to the state for all the work they did there.
Great. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Justin.
Thanks for having me. Good night.
Good night. Item 14, the position posting for city manager. Tom Hubbard, did you develop a position posting or not? Were we just gonna like discuss it and say, yes, go post it?
Yeah, I've not rewritten one, Helen. The one I sent to you was the one that was used last time.
See, I didn't get that. That's why I was wondering. I don't think I did anyway.
Okay. I'll resend it, and I'll include all the council in that. It's about a full 1-page posting. And I'll make sure that I copy all the council on that. But I think just looking to see if there are any specific ideas that you wanted included into the posting, and your thoughts as to where you might want to have this posted.
Okay. Should we have that brief discussion on the next meeting? When is the next one? The 7th?
7th.
Is that okay with everyone? Because we want to get it posted, and I've talked about with Kevin setting up a small public group who would receive the applications and identify sort of the top ones for the council to review and interview. Okay, does that sound good? All righty. Marcy, did you want to comment? Yes.
Yes, I was just curious whether it will have something in there about having a strong energy advocate, given the economic and health and safety issues related to climate change.
Well, we could add that. We can discuss that. I haven't seen it, so I don't know. That's always possible.
Right, I know. That's why I was curious if it's in there.
Have you sent it to Tom? We should probably have walk on water too, but we probably can't.
I know at one point Tom Chittenden at a previous meeting had suggested that on the committee that looks at these applications, perhaps someone from a someone with a long-term committee assignment could be on it. And I was just curious if that were still the case, and if so, whether someone from Energy Committee could participate in that. For the energy piece, in addition to obviously the general management and analytical skills that the person would have.
Yes, yes, Kevin and I have talked about having some different perspectives from the public.
Great, thank you.
So that would be my intention.
Thank you.
Okay, item 15, audiovisual bid for 180 Market Street. So is Alana.
Hi, good evening. So if I can keep this brief, but we do, I think per the memo, we did put the audio visual equipment for the building out to bid. We received 4 bids, and over the past few days, we've been looking at them and analyzing them. And so I have a recommendation, and if I can share my screen, I can put it up for you.
Okay.
Hold on a second. Let me do this. Okay.
Actually pretty brief, but
You should cover now.
okay. So I just want to make a very brief recommendation. Find my mouse. Okay, here we go. So essentially, we had 4 bids. The lowest bidder was Red Thread. FuzzBuzz was just behind them. There's just about $5,000 difference. Audiovisual Corporation was behind them with about 10,000, and then AVI SBL was behind them. So we went through and we looked at the pricing. We also looked at the qualifications. It's a fairly technical job, so we wanted to make sure that everyone had the appropriate certifications. And we also asked follow-up questions where there are areas that weren't clear or we wanted more information before we made a decision. We also called references, and then we discussed the team's needs. So following that, our recommendation is to go with BuzzBuzz. And there's 3 main reasons. They're highly recommended by references. They're very local. So they're a South Burlington company. And the equipment that they'll be installing has a high level of programming and integration. So there's integration within each room, and then some integration across the whole building. And then we would expect some future adjustments in annual preventative maintenance. There's generally upgrades. So it's nice to have technical on-call folks nearby who can help in case an upgrade creates problems, which from time to time, those of us who have computers know that that happens. And then in addition, their response was extremely detailed. It was clear that they had a very strong technical understanding of our project and our needs. And they also paid a lot of attention to our conditions and special requirements. And then as part of their proposal, they recommended potential cost savings. So there was a fair amount of variation in how people responded in terms of pricing going back. So when we look at these prices, FuzzBuzz and Red Thread are very close, but they're definitely, Red Thread is less expensive. They're about 1.5 to 3.5% less expensive, depending on how you look at it. We think that in the long run, that because FuzzBuzz is closer, and we know that they pay a lot of attention to detail, we think that it is a worthwhile investment for the city. But I want to throw that out there just so that you're aware that there is that financial difference between the 2.
Okay, questions?
Yes.
Tom, do you have your thing went on, but I can't see your hand.
I was just going to ask what we need to vote on. Is there a motion? But I support BuzzBuzz.
Yeah, I think we possibly want to vote on this. Tim Barrett, do you have a question?
Just a quick question. I mean, is there any employee of FuzzBuzz that's related to anybody in the city?
I I don't know. I did go online and look at their LinkedIn and made sure they had employees because they were very much, I think most of the people that they contract with are not local. So I, wanted to make sure that they did have some local references, and those are the ones that we called. But I wanted to make sure that they had local employees, which they do. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Quick question, I hope. I'm just curious, because I've never heard of them. How big a company are they?
So they have 16 employees.
Okay, where are they located
And
in
then they
town?
also have an office in California and an office in Florida.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Where are they located here?
They're located behind the airport.
All right,
They're located on Commerce. I think it's Commerce Ave behind the airport.
yeah, I know where
Oh,
you
right.
mean. What, I'm just curious, any of the references you might be able to share? I'm just curious.
Yeah, sure. So locally, they did work for the Saranac Hotel. They also did work for WeWork. Hang on, let me just pull it up. Dealer Policy, which is different from dealer.com. It's an insurance company. That's a national company.
Okay,
Sorry, I just want to find the reference page. Dealer Policy, which is in Williston. WeWork Collaboration Offices. The Hilton, it's the Rodell Group, multiple Hilton branded properties. So I talked to someone who handled the Saranac Lake renovation.
yeah,
And then they also do a lot of federal work. So a lot of DoD type jobs.
okay,
So like base type work and control room, scenario room type projects. But they also do auditoriums, more for corporate than for theatrical.
okay. Sounds, I mean, if you're comfortable with them, it sounds like you've checked them out. Great, I'll make a motion that we go with FuzzBuzz.
We have a second? Okay, we've got a motion that's been made and seconded to accept the bid from FuzzBuzz for the audiovisual needs of 180 Market Street. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, let's do a roll call. Dave Kaufman?
Thumbs up?
Megan Emery?
Aye.
Tom Chittenden?
Aye.
Tim Barrett?
Aye.
And Chair Reilly votes yay, so it's a 5-0 unanimous vote. Thank you, Alana.
Thank you.
They have the
Thanks very much,
cutest
Alana.
name, that's for sure. All right, moving on to almost the final item is the October financials with Tom Hubbard.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I think I can be fairly brief here. I gave you a quarterly report at the last meeting. We've now jumped from 25% through the fiscal year to a third through the fiscal year. We're currently at 25.5% in our expenses and 31% in our revenue, which is about where we plan to be. We're still looking to protect that margin of under expending our expenses and trying to come as close as we can with our revenue projections. At this point, as of today, still have not received the allotment due to us probably this week from the state on the local options taxes. So kind of anxiously awaiting that so that I can put this in better context for you. And once I do receive that, I'll be happy to share out a memo to you just to let you know where we came in, just to update you on that. But essentially not much more to report at this point on the financials, but happy to respond to any questions.
Are there any questions? I mean, it sounds like it's following the plan. We'll see what happens.
I'm
Okay.
curious about ambulance. It does seem like they have really reduced their expenses at 10% here.
Yeah, I know. That was amazing.
Is there an explanation for it?
Which, what's the line item, Megan?
Ambulance.
Let me just take a quick look here. So under ambulance, they've only spent 12% on their medical supplies to date, on the disposables. And again, I think that's part of the coordination with the UVM Medical Center in terms of the bulk purchasing. The medical equipment replacement, that has not been done yet. That's still on hold. So it's only showing a 17% at this point. I think those are probably the major parts of their
Even their
expense.
fuel is down now. I have to say. I
Yeah.
don't know if-
Yeah. Yeah, there's really not much to talk about right now. Of course, we still are living within the budget freeze, so managers are being respectful of that and only continue to purchase what we absolutely need to keep the operations going. We've just begun our CIP discussions, and we'll have an overview presentation for that for council on December 7th.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okey-doke. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So item 17, reports on committees. Has anybody's committee besides pension? No, you're having that soon, Tim? You haven't had it yet. Okay.
No, we had the meeting, but Pat Blizzak was going to present to us soon.
Okay. All right. Okay. And the
I
airport
could just tell you
commission.
that as of today, the pension value is up a little bit, probably.
Right. Yeah. Get a few more vaccination or vaccines that have 90 plus,
Success rates, yeah.
success
Irrational
rates, and
exuberance.
we'll be doing well. Okay, is there any other business? I actually have one item. I meant to say something at the beginning of the meeting and I forgot. And that is, I've had phone calls and or phone call and an email from Mr. Donahue regarding the offline discussion that he feels that the council had inappropriately about the other paper and the newsletter. And I just want to, it's clear to me, at least he told me, I was the one who had done the reply all. And I want to apologize. I understand that is a violation of the public or the public meeting law, and I apologize. And we talked about training, and I assured him that we have all been trained, but perhaps maybe it's what I need to do is we have a module online. So I would encourage everyone to go through that. I think it's 90 minutes or something. Jim Barlow created it for us. We probably should remind all the committees that are meeting again that haven't met in quite a few months, and many of them have new members, that they should also listen to the module online. And I can just assure the public that I will, I think that's the only time I've done it. I will try very hard not to push that reply all key by mistake. I think mistakes happen. I don't believe we did any huge policy decisions during our email conversation. And I think I just want to lay this to rest and just accept responsibility for, making that mistake and violating the open meeting law. I think it's a small violation, but it is one, and I will try very hard not to do that again. And I just urge everyone else, I think we're all aware of what is the appropriate protocol. And I would encourage you to I think it's online, and I can send you the link. I'll find it and send you the link for that training. And it's probably something that's good to do on a regular basis. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Helen. I mean, where I work, we have to renew our business conduct guidelines annually, as well as a bunch of other corporate policy reviews annually. There's about 6 of them that you have to go through, and they can take anywhere from 15 minutes to 45 minutes to complete. Watching videos, reviewing stuff, then taking a quiz at the end. So an annual review of city council conduct guidelines is not a bad idea, and we can all benefit from it.
Okay, well, we have the module created, so we should do that. So I will ask each of you to do that. And Kevin, if you'll remind the committees and the committee chairs and send that link out, I think that would be smart to do.
Can we hit reply all if we get that email from you and just,
Learn from our
Sorry.
mistakes.
Sorry. Sorry, slip of the tongue. Sorry.
Yep. Is there any other business?
Just that you've done a really good job, Helen. You did it. You're excellent at this online stuff.
Oh, well,
I
thank
agree.
you.
I mean, it was a completely egregious violation that you committed, but other than that, you're doing a great job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all our conversations forever have been about transparency. And ironically, I think the newsletter enhances the transparency of what's going on in city government in a way that we've never had before. So it sort of all worked out well. And
It worked out well.
And I think the other paper has, gotten thicker and has more articles that the public wants to read. I'm reading it again. I think, they're back to performing a little closer to the way they used to report on our city. So the combination of the two, I think, is keeping our public very well informed.
And they put back the crossword puzzle.
Oh, did they? Well, and the Councilor's Corner. Who wants to do the next one? It's due the first week in December.
I'll do the one after. I can't do the next one because.
You can do January?
Term.
Well, I don't know if you can do January because if you run for re-election, that's in March. So you can't do January.
You should do December, Dave, so that you can get something in there before it.
Yeah, you can do either December or March.
Oh, boy, it's going to be tough to do for December. December
Then
what?
don't do it in March. We got 3 other, Tom, Tim,
Yeah,
and one
It's
of you.
600 words. 600 words.
What do you want me to say?
You can talk about whatever you want. Tom.
I'll do December if you guys will give me input as to, I'll tell you what I'm looking for. You can give me some phrases and I'll put it together. How's that?
We each give you 120 words. It's,
You're right. You sound like my students. Just put it together.
Okay, so
Oh, wait, if
David
we each
will
give you
do the
150,
next
you get the whole
one.
thing.
Okay, who's gonna do January?
I'll do January.
Okay.
What am I going to write about? Give me an idea.
Wait and see what I write about.
The budget,
Okay.
maybe
Yeah.
you'll be able to write
Yeah.
about the budget. And then February.
I'll take February.
It's gonna be Tom or Megan, because neither Dave nor I. So
Tom's
Tom,
got it.
Okay. Well, you're going to be busy because you'll be able to do a legislative corner and a counselor's corner, and you'll be all set.
I'm just going to talk about a pool in both.
Well, it would be an
Okay.
ice skating rink at that point, right?
That's right. Yeah. Okay. If there's no other business, oh, Barb?
Sorry, it's almost Thanksgiving and you were talking about transparency and I just want to say thank you for the fact that all of you are transparent. I sent Kevin a note saying I understand about Common Roots now, and I appreciate that, but I just want to thank all of you for that. And I'll see you from wherever I am from the next few months, but thank you for all of your hard work.
Thank you very much. All right. So adjourn, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Okay. All in favor? Thumbs up. Oh, good. We're
right.
just about on
Have a
time.
nice Thanksgiving, everybody. Whatever you do, wherever you go, however you meet
Right.
with your family,
Yeah,
be
right.
safe, wear your mask, keep your distance.
Right.
Don't
I
go inside
know.
with people you don't know. Right. Stay
Okay.
healthy.
Yes. I wish you all the happiest. Yep.
You too.
Okie doke.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.